And good morning. Welcome in. It is a Tuesday edition of Glenn Clark Radio, but more importantly today, it is our annual College Lacrosse Preview Show. Patrick Stevens, of course, our friend from the Washington Post, USA Lacrosse Magazine, is with us this morning. Good to see you, sir. How are you?
I am well after having dodged a little beltway traffic to get here.
Yeah,
No worse the wear.
yeah. We got a busy show today. We're going to chat with all 7 head coaches from the D1 men's teams in the state of Maryland. So all throughout the morning, we're going to be joined by head coaches, and we're going to start off with a bang as joining us, kicking off our preview show this season is none other than the head coach at Towson University. He's Coach Shawn Nadelen, and he's with us this morning here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's good to chat with you. Thank you, as always, for taking the time for us.
Good morning, fellas. Always a pleasure on my end, and good to hear Pat's working on his dodge moves out there on the beltway.
Right?
He's getting ready for lacrosse season.
He's ready. He's ready to play attack, 100%.
Yeah.
You should see his bull dodge. It's amazing.
I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Coach, a lot to
no warning.
Right. Lot to cover with you. Let me start with the conference. Obviously, big changes in the CAA this year. What does it mean for you guys? Is it just, hey, look, there's some different opponents on the schedule, that's all it is? When you look up in the conference, it's sort of so wildly different as it is this year.
Yeah, we lose one team in UMass, and we had such a great history with them, some awesome games, and just great respect between the two programs. So, kind of sad to see them leave, but, welcoming in 3 teams with Hampton, Monmouth, and Stony Brook. It's exciting. You get to see some new opponents and see how your team, obviously stacks up against them. And, it makes our conference larger. So, in a way, it kind of decreases our out-of-conference schedule, so to speak. So that was an adjustment just with the conference schedule getting a little bit larger. But, being able to see a very familiar face in Coach Gallardi, who was my offensive coordinator for a long time, will be a lot of fun, and then know we're going to be tested by all those teams for sure.
On that scheduling front, the non-conference scheduling front, I know you got a little creative putting in that Thursday game in April against Denver. How important was it to be able to maintain so much of what you've been able to do, or at least as much of what you've been able to do over the years non-conference-wise, keeping a game like that, still having Virginia, still having Loyola, that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's been a challenge probably for a lot of programs, and we've worked really hard to build out our out-of-conference schedule to be able to make it as competitive as possible. And, glad that we were able to, with the addition of the CAA teams, the weekends that we previously had were those the Denver game and the Duke game. And then we were able to find another date for the Duke or the Denver game, which again is great, and being able to try to keep some of that non-conference scheduling intact and then just being creative. And, I know it's going to be part of the process moving forward with hopefully new teams coming into Division I and having to, figure out how you can make the schedule work.
Yes, Shawn Nadelen, Towson lacrosse coach. He's with us on this year's College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, obviously a year ago, got back to the conference title game. There's a monster that's sort of standing in the way in the CAA, and we saw Delaware and what they were able to do in the NCAA tournament, and I think a lot of people expect them to be right back into the mix. What is the biggest difference right now, or what is it going to take for you guys to sort of make that next jump and be able to get back to the NCAA tournament and get over the hump, knowing this is not a team that looks like it's going anywhere this season?
Sure. We got to rely on our experience that we return, from the past couple of years, and we have a good amount of that. And really lean on those guys' experience, knowing what helped us get to that point, through regular season CAA play, non-conference play, but also in the tournament. We definitely were not what we wanted to be in that championship game, but Delaware was also excellent, and they showed what they were capable of, not just kind of down the stretch in the CAA, but definitely through the CAA tournament and into the NCAA tournament, and they return everybody. So we know they're going to be an extremely strong and even more experienced team, and we got to be able to rely on ours, to counter that and combat that. And obviously, they're the team that everybody's looking at right now for this year in the CAA. But there's a lot of other pretty strong teams as well. So it'll be as always a great battle every week in the CAA.
Felt like in aggregate, your defense improved as the season went along, and obviously some key pieces back there, including Colby Bars at long pole. How do you kind of size up that end of the field for you guys, particularly that close unit and the rope unit combined?
It's when you look at it kind of on paper and stuff, it's our more experienced area. With everything except the goalie position. You look at our close defense, our long stick middies, our D middies. Those guys have played together for the past year or two, so we definitely have experience. But we also, so we're going to rely on that and hopefully continue to allow our defense be, kind of the strength of our program. But those guys need to continue to improve and continue to build that chemistry. And we need to figure out what we're going to look like in the goal. We got, great options and all of them are playing pretty well. Nobody's really stood out to be the guy yet. Not that we would need a guy. We're going to play the ones that deserve to be out there. But having a new guy in between the pipes is, a part of that defense that's, still trying to figure out how it's going to be filled. But, we're going to rely on those D guys and their experience to, put us in position to be successful.
I guess I can scratch. Have you made a decision about goalie off my list of questions? Then sounds like the answer is. And you guys still obviously have another exhibition before you play your opener, so some time to make that decision. Coach, as you referenced your defense, one that jumps out at me, how do you replace not just what he brings to the field, but the leadership of a Kobe Smith and how important he was to your program?
Yeah, I think that's maybe the bigger piece. Obviously, he was a tremendous talent on the field with his defensive ability, but also his ability in between the lines and pushing transition. So, we got to always play to our strengths, and when you have talented players like that, you got to be able to adjust maybe what you do and evolve. And we did that with Kobe, and that, benefited us for a few years. But, now relying on what we have and what we're capable of and playing to those strengths. His leadership was strong. He had a good presence on the field and, had a good voice. So I think the guys that are returning that were around him, we're able to learn from that and recognize maybe how he handles some situations and things like that and learn from that, but also tie that into who they are and how they are, leaders now and be able to learn from the guys that were before them and be able to put that into their own tool belt and use it when needed.
At the other end, at the offensive end of the field, how much do you think things are going to run through Nick DeMeo and Kyle Berkeley this year? I think two guys that came in and were able to really have a big impact on you last season. DeMeo with his 36 goals and Berkeley going 25 and 18 out of the midfield.
Yeah, Kyle's, definitely an imposing presence and draws a lot of attention and is, can be a matchup, problem, and we want to utilize that and, but also protect him and, because he's a big physical guy and not just rely on him to have to take on 2 to 3 guys. So, like always within our offense, we want to have everybody share the ball, all 6 guys on the field working together, doing their 1/6 and, making sure the ball doesn't kind of die in one guy's stick. It did that at times for us offensively last year. And, we got some really good pieces in place. Nick obviously being a part of that and, what he can do, with his shot and his IQ and communicating on the field and, adding in some more experienced guys, but also some new guys into the mix, into the offensive end. It's been a lot of fun for us over the fall and into the preseason here. So seeing how all that fits together and manufacture some goals is going to be, a good part of the process here as we get rolling into the season.
He is Shawn Nadelen, Towson lacrosse coach. He is with us. Just another couple of minutes as we preview the Tigers this season. You mentioned, obviously, the defense is the strength, and it's sort of what we come to know about Towson lacrosse when it comes to, the Shawn Nadelen era, right? It's that we've expected that to be the strength. But as you reference those guys, do you see a world in which like this team as built could be a little bit more capable of scoring some goals, and maybe there aren't quite as many, 7-6s, 6-5s as maybe been used to over the years when it comes to Towson lacrosse?
Yeah, we'd like to keep opponents to those numbers for sure.
Yeah.
But definitely pumping some more goals on our end. You look at guys like, Ryan Swain on the offensive end, Austin Stewart, Chop Gallagher, and John Bender, and guys that have played for us, in the past, Alex Reed. Those guys are all back into the mix again this year. So bringing that experience, bringing their skill sets to it, and continuing to evolve offensively. And we got some young guys that'll be in the mix with them to bring their own talents to the field, working together on the offensive end. So I'd say, that coming into form, as well as hopefully being better at the face-off X, returning Matt Constantinides and Shane Santora, who are our face-off guys last year, and doing, decent there, kind of okay to a decent. I think we can elevate that position, as well as bringing in two pretty competitive freshman face-off guys. So we have more resources, more competitiveness and practice for those guys to make each other better. So I think that's been a positive, with everything that we're moving into this season.
I did want to bring up the face-offs a bit because you mentioned Matt Constantinides. Last year was 45.5% for the year, but 58% in CAA play. So I got to think that was one of the bright spots for you guys throughout April and into May. That he was a guy that kind of came on strong as that first year came to a close.
Yeah, we only had it was Matt and Shane all last year. That's all we had for face-off options that were kind of purely face-off guys. We had some other guys. We had a long stick and Sam Moran and Ray Glass, who's a deep midi, ready to go if needed. But those two guys just beat up on each other all practice and made each other better. And by the time we got into CAA play, and Matt kind of established himself as kind of the lead guy there, and Shane was, continued to be a great mentor and get his reps when we needed him to. And then that relationship has continued to flourish. But now getting those other guys in the mix, I think Matt's got that, experience underneath him. Shane's got the experience. So hopefully improving upon that CAA number and, when we get into the CAA play, but also, being able to do that in our non-conference play and getting more possessions our way and capitalizing that, your face-off guy, really is only as valuable as the offense that he gets the ball to. He can get you 80% of the ball, off the face-off, but if your offense isn't scoring, those possessions don't really matter. So again, you got to be able to capitalize on those. You saw what Maryland was able to do last year with, Weirman, doing what he did at the X, and then their offense being as high-powered as it was. When those two things are operating at a very high level, it's a very dangerous team, for that.
Yeah, it helps to be able to go about 13 deep like they did a year ago on their attack. Shawn Nadelen, the season gets underway next Saturday, the 11th, at Mount St. Mary's. First home game, February 18th, when they welcome St. Joe's to United Stadium. Coach, always appreciate taking the time. Best of luck this season. We'll, of course, be in touch, and we'll be chatting with you as it goes along. Appreciate you joining us this morning, as always.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Coach Shawn Nadelen from Towson checking in with us here on the College Lacrosse Preview Show. Patrick Stevens, your thumbnail on the Tigers?
Well, I think the thing that stands out about Towson is can they survive that opening month or so of the season? I mean, it doesn't necessarily look as imposing on paper as it really is, right? Like, you don't necessarily think, oh, St. Joe's, oh, Richmond. Those are tournament teams from last year. St. Joe's gave Yale a run and brings back much of its team this year. Richmond was a team that took Penn to overtime last year and is really, really well coached. And then Loyola, UMBC, Virginia, and then it's into CAA play. And so, if Towson can develop that offense and can get the faceoffs right and can get the goalie situation settled, if, then they could be a really interesting team. If not, then it's going to basically be a scramble to get one of those 4 CA tournament spots and hope to be peaking in May.
Right, but have your best game when you need to against what I assume that you also look at Delaware.
I think Delaware is the favorite in that league, but there's no reason to think that the way that both of those teams play. Like Delaware's, you think about those, frankly, it kind of remind me a little bit of the way Towson played for a while. Very buttoned up and a team that's just kind of grind you down and stuff like that. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Delaware get into an 11-10, 10-9 type of conference tournament final against a team like a Towson, if that's what somebody wants to try to play against them, because that's kind of what they do. I mean, they beat Georgetown 10-9 in the tournament. They played a low-scoring game against Cornell in the tournament.
Is there a chance that Delaware could compete for an at-large this year?
I think there is a chance that Delaware could compete for an at-large this year. As Shawn just mentioned, they bring back just about everybody. That attack is pretty much back in its entirety. I think they bring back 5 of their starters on offense. The goalie's back. Owen Grant is as good a defenseman as you're going to find anywhere, maybe anywhere not named Will Bowen at Georgetown.
Sure.
I mean, he's one of the top 3 to 6 guys. He's in that conversation with Makar from Maryland and Gavin Adler from Cornell and a handful of other guys, Kastner at Virginia. So, they are really, really good. And I had the chance to see them in person twice during the postseason last year, and there were moments like, what were these guys doing in a play-in game?
Sure.
They figured it out, and they have just about everybody back. And, getting that close to a Final Four and not getting there is kind of a recipe for being even hungrier. Like
right.
If that team makes the Final Four last year, maybe some of those guys don't come back. That's a great accomplishment to walk off with. Maybe some of those guys aren't quite as motivated coming into this year.
Yeah.
But getting that close and now having a loaded roster back, they're going to be really, really good.
All right, he is Patrick Stevens, of course, at Discourse, D1S Course is how you follow him. Washington Post, USA Lacrosse Magazine. He is with us this morning. So Towson was up first. Next up, we're going to chat with Joe Amplo from Navy. Then still to come this morning, Charley Toomey from Loyola, Tom Gravante from Mount St. Mary's. In I was going to say second hour, but we started early, so you know what? It's all going to be screwy today.
The second full hour.
Yeah, the second full hour of the show. Ryan Moran from UMBC will join us. We'll also be joined this morning by the head coach, the defending national champions, John Tillman from Maryland, and then we'll wrap up today's show with Peter Milliman, the head coach at Johns Hopkins. So we will chat with all 7 D1 men's head coaches in the state of Maryland. Today's show is brought to you by your local Toyota dealer and buyatoyota.com. The Toyota Tacoma comes in a range of models and trim lines, so you can choose the perfect Tacoma to reflect your unique personality and driving habits. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new Tacomas from your local Toyota dealer today. And a reminder, there are great offers available for you if you're thinking about signing up for sports betting in the state of Maryland. Go to PressBoxOnline.com/offers. Right now, you can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly if you're signing up for the first time with DraftKings. You can go find that right now. PressBoxOnline.com/offers. Before we chat with Joe Amplo, anything big picture for people? I don't think the average person realizes the season starts this weekend.
The season does start this weekend,
including for some of these, like Joe Amplo, for example. His season starts this weekend. Mount St. Mary's season starts this weekend. Johns Hopkins season, Maryland season starts this weekend. Are there any big picture storylines to you? Clearly, Maryland is sort of a giant in all of this, riding a win streak after one of the greatest seasons in the history of the sport. But are there any other big storylines for you within lacrosse on the whole?
Well, I think one of the things that last year we wondered what the Ivy League was going to be like when it came back, and they wound up with 6 teams in the NCAA, 6 out of 7 in the NCAA tournament. What's the encore there? That was a young Harvard team. That was a Brown team that came on strong. Princeton, Yale, Cornell, Penn, all loaded. Can any and all of those teams end up back in the field, back threatening to win games, multiple games in the NCAA tournament? One thing that stands out, and I'm not a big preseason rankings person, not a big rankings person, period, but we got preseason polls out and no sign of either Syracuse or Johns Hopkins in the top 20.
It is weird.
And it is a weird, weird thing. And so I think both of those teams have the potential to upset the apple cart a little bit this year. Syracuse in year 2 under Gary Gate, Hopkins in year 3 under Peter Milliman. For Syracuse, I think they've revamped a lot of things up there.
Okay.
And then on the Hopkins front, with a new offensive coordinator, with John Crawley, which we'll talk to Peter Milliman about later, I think that is a team that has a chance to take a step this year, and I think that they're finally much closer to being on the same page than they were over the last couple years for a variety of reasons. reasons.
And probably worth pointing out the Bill Tierney tour.
Bill Tierney retirement tour too,
right.
which does make a stop in Baltimore, in Towson.
Yep.
In
and
April.
they were here for a scrimmage this weekend,
and they were
right?
here for a scrimmage on Saturday. So, but the Lion in winter with his 7 titles, I don't know if he's going to get an 8th, but I don't think he's going to go quietly into the night at all.
I understand that thought process. It would be a mistake to write off a Bill Tierney team, particularly knowing it is his final year. All right, Patrick Stevens is with us. It is our annual College Lacrosse Preview Show. And next up on the hot seat, we welcome back the head coach at the Naval Academy. He is Coach Joe Amplo, and he's with us now here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's great to chat with you as always. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes for us this morning.
Thank you, guys. Excited to be on the hot seat with you both. Good to talk with you.
Oh, and we're going to grill you. We are not, we've got a lot of, not really. I don't have all that hard stuff. It seems like there's a lot of momentum building over these last couple of years with your program, Coach. I guess for you, the difference in the foundation that you have laid versus being able to break through in a Patriot League that's getting no easier and top teams are going away, the biggest difference in what it's going to take this season to you would be what?
Well, honestly, it's consistency. I think for us now, our staff finally knows this place and the individuals. I think all of us, coming in with this class for us, it gave us a chance to really understand these guys and get to know them personally and build the culture that we really wanted together. And we finally feel like for us that the culture we wanted in place. And mostly credit to the senior class for buying into us when we got here and then growing and building this together.
When you size up the midfield that you guys have been able to build here over the last several years, Patrick Skowniak, Dane Swanson, Max Hewitt, among other guys in that mix, but those are the names that kind of stand out. Just how imposing a group is that, and just how much of a difference-making force can they be for you guys as you navigate this season?
I do think that certainly last year they were the kind of the highlight of our team offensively. But for those guys, the 3 guys you mentioned, I think reliability is one thing that we know we're going to get from them. We know what we have there. But as we built more depth on the offensive end specifically, I think we're going to allow those guys to not feel the burden as much potentially, but also rely on them when we need some big plays.
He is Joe Amplo from Navy. He's with us here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, I was reading this preview that this guy Patrick Stevens wrote for USA Lacrosse Magazine, and he was telling me all about Mac Haley. And apparently there's a lot of people that think very highly. And I know it's a new player, and you don't want to put a lot of pressure on a young man, but it seems like around the country there's a lot of people that think that this is a young player that could offer you guys something significant early in his career.
Well, Patrick, I appreciate Patrick's thoughts on him, and I believe he's spot on. It's interesting. Mac has not played like a freshman any day this year. Each practice he comes out, and his compete level is as high as anyone's. He does have a wealth of talent, but what I think is most impressive to me is just the mental ability that Mac has. He wants to go after the best defenseman. He doesn't back down from a challenge. And he has all the tools in the toolbox to be a really good college lacrosse player.
You got to see some of Xavier Arline last season after he joined you guys and was able to stay healthy at times last year. What sort of impact can he have this year? And overall, just what does he kind of bring to the table with his athleticism and skill set?
Well, first of all, let me just mention that, I believe his football experience and how he developed into the starting quarterback and took the reins of that program towards the end of the season has allowed him to reach the confidence level that he has, and he knew was inside of him. And also, I think, this year his mindset, he understood what the transition was going to be like from football to lacrosse. So he came in to preseason practices a different player, just a different presence about him. And then he brings that high-level athleticism that is extremely exciting to all of us. So I do think he's a different player than what we had last year, and he can provide certainly a spark whenever the ball is in his stick. But that confidence that he brings, I think, can lift the tide, because he does have that presence on the field and in our locker room just by the human being that he is.
Joe, could you tell me, like, practically what this looks like with him doing both spring football and playing for you guys this season, right? Like, how does that work? Like, are there days where, you got to be in communication with somebody else? Like, what is that? How does that map out? Is it as crazy as it sounds to somebody like me, an idiot who was never a high-level athlete?
Well, I give yourself a little bit more credit than calling yourself an idiot. First of all, I think you're a little biased. But I mean, right now, honestly, it has not been that big of a challenge, and I'm blessed to have a great relationship with the football staff and Coach Newberry, and he's given us the opportunity to let X his dreams. And we couldn't do this with every other player. X is a special young man, and he's able to handle it. Right now, it's not a challenge. He's a full-time lacrosse player. Once spring football starts, just after spring break here, it will become difficult in the sense that he's going to have to balance playing football. He'll go to the practice field there when they do practice, and he'll miss some lacrosse throughout the week. Now, their schedule is demanding. However, it matches up pretty good with ours, where the days he's going to miss, we just have to make sure we're mindful of that, and we prepare him in other ways. I've been around this sport long enough to know that guys like Doug Shanahan, who did both, he had a pretty good run early on in my career. And when Brian Spolina was the first-team All-American for us at Hofstra, he was a student teacher and missed practice every day of the week. So I think, X is of that mindset. He's an elite athlete, and I think because he's wrapped himself around this institution and is on solid ground academically and within the football program, he can handle both.
You don't tell your players that you once had a star player that missed practice every day, right? Like, you don't want to build in excuses for guys to maybe say today's not all that important.
Well, I mean, look, he's not going to sleep in his dorm room. He's going to go to the football field and hopefully wear a red jersey, not get hit. But he's going to be doing something pretty intense. So but we're not spreading that word too far.
Joe, at the other end of the field, when we talked back in December, we talked about Jackson Bonnets, and you mentioned that you feel like you have enough pieces back at that end of the field that maybe you guys could do a little bit more to exploit Jackson's versatility and maybe see him more than just simply a close defense spot. How has that kind of come along, and how well equipped is he to be able to handle a variety of assignments back there?
Yeah, I think he can handle whatever we throw at him. And our depth now, or potential depth, has allowed us to think more creatively with our defensive game plans. So, he could be up on the wings of faceoffs. If we do activate the 10-man ride, he would be the guy we would put up there. We can also move him around because we have other players that have the ability to cover some big-time offensive threats. So using him in a matchup that he might be able to own as opposed to just neutralize, we can start to do those things because we've got some depth on the defensive end.
I think we call that a nice issue to have, right? Like, you call that something it's a good flexibility to have. Coach Joe Amplo from Navy is with us. Coach, you guys are getting a lot of attention this preseason. You're ranked in the preseason poll. There is sort of a feel nationally like Navy is a team that's ready to step up and make that jump. Do you welcome that? Do you try to block all of that out? Like, how do you handle that with a program that is trying to make the next step?
Well, I mean, listen, you want to welcome it because that's what we're all aiming for, right? To be able to compete at the highest level of this sport. However, I'm mindful of the fact that, quite frankly, since I've been here, we haven't done it consistently enough, in order to compete nationally. So I think there's a lot for this group to prove, both our staff and also our players. So we welcome the attention, but we've got to be mindful of just living up to our standard every day and realizing that we've got a heck of a lot to prove if we want people to be talking about us later in the season as opposed to the beginning.
Another position I wanted to ask a bit about, the goalie spot, Pat Ryan back, but also a very promising freshman in Dan Daly. How has that competition kind of gone, and how optimistic are you, short-term and long-term, about what you've got in that unit?
Yeah, my optimism is extremely high. I give Pat Ryan a tremendous amount of credit because he's been pushed since day one from when Dan Daly arrived here. And Pat has only risen to that challenge and brought his standard of play up. But Dan has lived up to it as well. And right now they're neck and neck. So we haven't made a decision yet on who will be the starter or if we're going to go back and forth. But I do think that you'll see both of those guys in between the pipes for Navy this year.
Wow. Any other newcomers that we should be aware of that maybe jump out a little bit and say, this is a guy that I think is ready to step in and have a role pretty quickly for us?
Sure. Jack Flaherty is a guy who will be in our top 6 offensive players.
Wow.
Chad Connolly, he'll be in our top 3 short stick defensive midfielders. Sean Gallagher will be in the long stick midi rotation. And AJ Hernandez is a guy that can play long stick midi and close defense, who is just an excellent lacrosse player. You'll see him early on in our season, at the top of the depth chart as well.
Hernandez, a Baltimore kid, right, from Boys Latin. So that's a very interesting local sort of tie to this team. I was looking at the weather forecast for Saturday. Lacrosse weather, right? The nice 28-degree day in Annapolis. It's perfect weather to start a season, right?
As luck would have it, it's been a pretty mild winter so far, but I think the weather gods are telling college lacrosse you're kind of silly for starting the season so early, and here's the coldest day of the year for you to kick this thing off.
The idea of playing 2 games on the first weekend, can you just sort of tell me about how that came about? And did you maybe kick yourself afterwards? Like, what am I thinking? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, we went with back and forth on it and questioned it. However, it's hard to schedule games sometimes, and I know for every player, not just ours, but every team, if you ask those guys, the players individually, would you rather play a game or scrimmage or practice, they would all jump up and say, let's play games. So the opportunity presented itself to be able to play 2 games in back-to-back days. We just have to be mindful of the rest and recovery prior to those events, which I think we've done a pretty good job of. But I'm not worried about it. I think it'll be a great opportunity for us to learn a lot about our program in a short amount of time.
It all starts Saturday at noon against Mount St. Mary's, and as we mentioned, again, quick turnaround. Sunday, they'll be at home against a new D1 team, Queens University, as well. So 2 opportunities for you to get down and check out the midshipmen this weekend in Annapolis. Coach Joe Amplo, always appreciate taking the time. We will be in touch as the season goes on. Thank you for doing this morning, my friends.
Thanks, guys. Great talking with you.
Joe Amplo, Navy head coach, with us here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Your thumbnail on the midshipmen.
Well, I think he kind of covered it straight out of the chute, the consistency issue. You think about how they've played well against Army. They picked off Loyola a couple years ago. They've had some good moments over the last few seasons. And I think when I talked to Joe back in December, he was talking about how it's taken longer than he thought it would. But just because of the pandemic, because of getting used to the academy. It's not like being at a civilian school, all that. But I think that they're on the cusp of something here, and I think that this is not a bad year to try to give it a go in terms of making a push. You look at a Loyola, and maybe they're not quite at the level that they historically have been. They certainly don't have a Pat Spencer that we're sitting around talking about. I think Army lost a fair bit from last year. I think all these teams, by the way, are going to be good. Like the top 5 or 6 in the Patriot League.
And BU still looks
like... And BU's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And I would tell you in that league that the team to look out for that we haven't talked about pretty much ever is Lafayette.
Really?
I think that is a team that we're going to see in the Patriot League tournament. There's your hot take for the morning.
Okay.
We will see Lafayette in the Patriot League tournament this year.
I have some thoughts. I will share that with you when we go to break. However, about that is wild, man. Thinking about the idea of Lafayette being in the Patriot League tournament.
They had a lot of good young players last year.
Okay,
and I think they are prepared to turn a corner.
All right, that will be interesting to pay attention to. But it does look like Navy is has the potential to be a team
absolutely
that could be set.
Absolutely, you look at the offensive personnel; they're really dynamic, and we didn't even get into 6'6" John Jarris.
Right,
right. I mean, and that's a guy that I think Navy's really excited about his level of consistency in the fall. So you have all those guys. Our line on attack, Haley on attack, the midfielders with Skalniak and Swanson and Hewitt. And Flaherty, the freshman. and you've got Bonnets, and you've got multiple goalie options. I do think the face-offs are a little bit of a vulnerability there. I think realistically, Joe Amplo would probably tell you that we didn't get into it, but he would probably tell you that, against the Sisselbergers and the Calderones and what have you in that league, it's like if you can keep it anywhere near 50%, you're going to be thrilled. But
I feel like anybody in the country keeps it near 50% with Mikey Sisselberger. They're
against
feeling pretty good
yeah.
about themselves.
But what I mean is that there's a certain degree of, there's a couple tough matchups there.
No question.
And so if you can end up in that 50% range for the year, you're probably going to be okay. And given the options that they have, I think that's really all they need to do is just to break even, sort of the long-term Maryland philosophy before Luke Wehrman came along, right? Like just get your split and take your chances from there. So
there you go. He is Patrick Stevens. He's with us in studio this morning. If you've not picked up the best of issue of Press Box, it's available for free at your neighborhood Royal Farms, any of the hundreds of locations around town where you find Press Box. Only a couple of more weeks for this one with Adley Rutschman, our Mo Gabba Sports Person of the Year, on the cover. Go get it right now. We will grab a break here. When we come back in, we're going to be joined by the head coach at Loyola, Coach Charley Toomey, joins us next as we kind of go Patriot League to Patriot League. Look at we go Big Ten to Big Ten later. We go Patriot League to Patriot League here. It's like we produced this or something. It was like somebody put some thought in. It's our College Lacrosse Preview Show, Glenn Clark Radio. It's the perfect time to sign the young basketball fan in your life up for a membership in the Retriever Kids Club. It includes free youth admission to all regular season UMBC home games, plus a t-shirt and a drawstring backpack. Membership is only $35. It makes a great gift. Visit UMBCRetrievers.com/Kids Club for more info. Membership is available for kids 12 and under in the Retriever Kids Club. Again, UMBCRetrievers.com/Kids Club.
The latest edition of Press Box is available now, and it's our annual Best of issue. On the cover, we recognize Orioles catcher Adley Rutschman as our 2022 Mo Gabba Sports Person of the Year, and he sits down with us to discuss how his arrival in Baltimore was simultaneous with the Birds' turnaround. Also inside, we recognize the top people, performances, and moments of the year throughout the local sports scene. Press Box is available for free at over 500 area locations, including 60 Royal Farm stores, and you can always find the entire edition as well as the best daily coverage of the Orioles, Ravens, and Terps at PressBoxOnline.com.
Looking for some excitement in the new year? Laurel Park has plenty of live horse racing events to spice things up this January. The much-anticipated Winter Meet kicks off on January 1st, plus we've got special MLK Holiday Racing on Monday, January 16th, and the Winter Carnival Stakes on Saturday, January 21st. Winter may be cold, but the racing at Laurel Park is hot. Learn more about upcoming January events by visiting laurelpark.com.
That first sip, that first bite. Start your day off right with a delicious breakfast at Royal Farms. Choose from a fantastic selection of fresh Royal Farms breakfast sandwiches and top it off with a rich hot cup of the freshest coffee in the world. At Royal Farms, breakfast is available day and night. It's the freshest breakfast in the world. Real fresh, real fast. Royal Farms.
Stan the Fan here, welcoming back one of my favorite sponsors, the Costas Inn. And everybody around Baltimore knows the Costas Inn is a great place to go and grab crabs, steaks, salads, soups, whatever's on your mind to eat in person. But did you know that the Costas Inn has upped their game? They are now one of the premier takeout places in Baltimore. Give them a call now to order your food, 410-477-1975. That's the Costas Inn, over 4100 North Point Boulevard.
Tune in to Simply the Bets every Tuesday and Weekend at Bookies every other Thursday at 11:40 a.m. And if you really have nothing better to do, keep listening to this show too.
Back in here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show on GCR. Patrick Stevens, the Washington Post, USA Lacrosse Magazine, is in studio with us. Thanks to my buddy Rami Lavi, who's hanging out with us this morning. Filling in as Griffin's down. He went down to Disney World with his family. I don't know what's going on with this show in Disney World this month, but he's down at Disney with his family this week. Not going to cost him nearly as much money as it cost me. I know that much. God, still recovering from that. It's going to be a little while.
You're making me just sort of shudder over here.
Yeah. Look, man, the kids were very happy, and it's going to be a one-time thing. There will not be a second trip to Disney World at any point. That will never occur, but they had a wonderful time. So thanks to Rami. Charles is hanging out this morning as well. Between the two of them, they got things covered. I trust them. I believe in them. That's the way it goes. Patrick, next up on the hot seat will be Loyola's Charley Toomey. He's going to join us in just a second. Still to come. I wanted to cover, there are a couple of rules changes this year, but they're nothing significant. Like, they changed the rule with the mouth of the goal so that, like, if you get pushed in, as long as you don't make contact with the goalie, you're okay. Something like that, right?
Something like that. Yeah, it was not a huge year for the rules committee in the off season. So
right.
We're not going to have like some sort of earth shaking shot clock or something like that really alters the fabric of the game the way that some previous rules changes did.
So yeah, nothing that's going to be like it's going to take us a couple of weeks to get used to or something along those lines.
Or one of those rules that gets called in the first 2 or 3 weeks,
and then they kind of right,
and then gets ignored the rest of the season.
I remember a couple of those over the years.
Nothing like a point of emphasis that disappears once we get into when spring actually starts.
Next up on the hot seat, he is the head coach at Loyola. He is one of my favorite people. You guys know that. He's Coach Charley Toomey. He's back with us now here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's always great to catch up with you, my friend. Thank you, as always, taking a couple of minutes for us.
I'm a little disappointed. I'm not in studio with you guys this year.
Yeah, we moved. We really kind of screwed everything up. We used to be right down the street. Coach could basically walk to the old studio from his office.
Absolutely right.
Unfortunately, now that we're out in Towson and you guys doing practice or whatever it is, trying to get ready for the season, it makes it tougher. We miss seeing you. It's great.
It gets in the way of things, doesn't it?
Yeah, right, you jerk. Why would you schedule? Couldn't you schedule around us? What's wrong with you? You know, I look, I'm gonna say this. It's not like you guys won 3 games last year. Like, I understand it wasn't a miserable season by any stretch of the imagination, but I know it was a disappointing season for you guys, and you didn't meet your own expectations. What is that? Can you take me through as a program? Do you have to, sit down and look at everything and say, do we need to do things differently? Or can you just say, hey, we had some bad luck, some things didn't go our way, we know we're still very much, doing everything the right way, let's not make any sort of crazy changes?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. You certainly, you take a moment after the season to kind of reflect on the year in general and, kind of take the good and to make sure that you're holding on to that. And, whether or not it's a drill or it's personnel based or, what quite honestly I came away with was I thought we were inside too much. And that was weather related, but I think it affected our goalies. I really think that we developed some tough habits, inside and not seeing the ball. And I think that, when you're a team that really wants to run, right. And, we felt like last year we had a lot coming back, returning going into the season. Certainly our goaltender was one of them who I think everybody remembers, the one save against Denver to propel us to the Final 8. We felt like, okay, we've got a lot of things figured out. A lot of the template is in place, but it just didn't work out that way. And the other side of it is, with the fifth years, we don't have the ability to bring in kids from other programs, for a fifth year as a Patriot League rule. So all of the kids that were returning as fifth years were guys that had been part of the success that we had. And you just kind of felt like, okay, not that you didn't have to develop a team, but there are new faces, there are new freshmen in there and the chemistry changes a little bit. And having fifth year guys that are taking classes downtown and in Timonium, in Columbia, like just, it doesn't naturally happen, right? Like, with guys that are living in the dorms together and guys that are attending classes together. So, I think 1, the chemistry piece, 2, giving our goaltenders a better chance to kind of get their feet, under them, see the ball, not develop bad habits. We've been inside one time this year. And even looking outside right now, and it's cold and it's rainy, and I said, okay, well, we're definitely starting outside. We're going to warm our goalies up and give them a chance. And I feel like we've got to do that. And not that every year is like that. I can remember years ago going inside and saying, we've had success early season because of our ability to be inside. Every team's a little different. Every goaltender might be a little different, and so. You just, again, you look at certain things and what worked well, what didn't work well. you certainly talk to the players and, you try to reflect on it. But I love the energy. I like this group this year for sure. And I like how we've practiced. And I think that we've come together really well. We'll see what it looks like, in a few weeks. But I like where we are.
Charley, I'm struck by how here in the preseason, kind of the external kind of looking in on Loyola, and you don't see Loyola in the top 20 anywhere, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody. And the striking thing to me is that the last time that Loyola was in this sort of situation was 2012, and I seem to recall number 20, not 21 or whatever, being repeated as a number a lot that year. Are there any parallels for you to that team and this team, just in terms of the hunger and sort of the awareness that maybe this is a Loyola team that's been overlooked a little bit?
Any coach is going to tell you they're going to play that up a little bit. Quite honestly, I look at the identity of our team, and I am more comfortable coaching a team that is known for playing good, solid defense, and then wants to get out and run and create transition and, really play an up-tempo style. And I feel like, we had Pat, right? Pat Spencer, everybody knew Pat. We wanted the ball to touch Pat's stick every time, the ball came down the field. And we didn't push the tempo as much because we were very comfortable playing in 6-on-6 sets. So we kind of got away from, in some way, shape, or form, and rightly so. I mean, having the best player, arguably, in the Baltimore area forever, you wanted it in his stick. I think we lost a little bit of our way in terms of once he was gone, not pushing the tempo like we used to. So we're trying to get back to that, right? We're trying to have short sticks run the field and try to, create some better situations for us between the lines. And it's a work in progress. But to me, that's the identity that I'm very comfortable with. And I think our team, it's a fun way to play. And I've watched it, develop within practice to a point where I'm really looking forward to seeing what it looks like, on Saturdays in the future.
Charley Toomey, head coach of the Loyola Greyhounds, with us on the College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, it sounds like you might be kind of answering one of my questions, which was, do you expect there to be, you're losing your top 2 points getters from a season ago, do you expect someone to kind of step up and become more of an alpha? The way you answered the last question, it sort of sounds more like I'd prefer that we didn't have a singular alpha offensively.
Yeah, I do think that, people will point to the development of a kid like Seth Higgins and Evan James and then Adam Patra, had a really good year with the U21 Canadian team. I think people will point to those names, but the ball is not dying in any one of their sticks. And Coach Van's done, without having a pure finisher like a Kevin Lindley, I think what we have found is that we've got to create offense and just keep the ball moving and take the best one that we can get, right? And so we don't have that one guy where we're kind of all looking at saying, hey, he's got to play well today. He's got to have 5 assists for us to have any success. We've got multiple guys kind of playing within a game. I would tell you that we probably don't have 3 attackmen that, are 60-minute guys. We've got multiple guys that are going out there and really giving us minutes so far, right? Like through one scrimmage, but through the fall as well. I think that it's a team that is hopefully going to be better at the end of the year and just continue to grow, because we just played Richmond in a scrimmage, and, if 5 of our top 9 offensive players were freshmen. So it's hard to guard guys because even on our sideline, we're not sure what they're going to do. We give them a plan, but it's a lot of chaos out there. And so, it bodes well for the future, but obviously there's going to be some growing pains, but we like what we're seeing.
Charley, doubling back to the goalies and what have you, I know Sam Schaefer, multi-year starter for you guys. I know you've always been very high on Luke Stout and his potential, and he obviously started a game last season. How has he done in this preseason, and how encouraged are you with how that position is shaping up at the moment?
Yeah, the one thing I'm always proud of, in our locker room is just the chemistry within that position, because there's competition. One guy plays, but I feel like with Freeman Whitaker, who's a fifth-year guy for us, and Max Watkinson, who's a freshman, local young man from St. Paul's, and Colton Titelbaum, a senior. Those guys have a great chemistry together. Luke has, through the fall, kind of gravitated to kind of being our one guy, and starting and getting the majority of the minutes. And I just like the way he's competing in there. I really do. I like the way he's leading our defense. I like the energy he plays with, and he's played well through the scrimmages. And I would say that I'm very comfortable. Should there be a situation where we had to kind of look to the sideline, I like where Freeman is. I like where Max and Colton are. But I would tell you that Luke's a young man that was the Syracuse Player of the Year for 3 years in a row for a reason. He's a good player, and we're lucky that we have him. And I think the guys in front of him really enjoy playing for him, because we always say you want a goalie that makes somebody play better. And I think those guys feel organized when he's in there. I think they really want to, dig in and force low angle shots, which is important for us. But Luke is this year catching the ball. And if you can catch the ball, you can play fast. If you can't catch the ball, and it's a rebound, or, you're resetting and you've got to kind of throw down to the sides, then it's hard to run. And Luke's doing a really good job of catching the ball and allowing us to be, a team that wants to run, that can.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about, in another up the middle position, it feels like you've had Savios taking faceoffs forever.
Decade.
Just about a decade. But
8 years, 9 years.
Yeah. So, what's it like to not have that now? I know Bailey was not the main guy that first year in 2018, but he basically was a split time type of situation. What's it like moving on from the Savio family after having such reliable play here for the last almost decade?
Yeah. It's it was a little odd at first, and but knowing that we've had Eric Pacheco and Chris Catone, kind of in the wings waiting for that moment. Now Chris has kind of been battling a little bit of the injury bug. So Eric Pacheco has taken the majority of our faceoffs. Then we brought a young man in, a transfer to help at that position mid-year. Young guy by the name of Sawyer Allen from Curry College. And so Coach Vakeness has some tools in the box, but it definitely looks a little different, those guys, it's almost like I joke around, but in Steve we trust, right? In Monk we trust. And there's a reason that those Savio boys have been as good as they have been. And, it's really, you can look no further than our Coach Vakeness, and how he develops those guys and the plan that he has from day one, how to prepare them for game day.
Yeah, obviously defense appears to be quite a strength for you guys. Cam Wires, Peyton Razanka. I'm wondering, I saw Peyton up at the USA Lacrosse event this past fall, and he was right back to harassing and confounding and frustrating the best players in the world. I wanted to ask you what you thought that experience gave to him, but I guess I want to double down on that, and maybe we'll have to revisit this after the World Championships this summer. But what has that experience with the national team done for you and helped you and grown, allowed you to grow even to this point so deep into your career?
Yeah, quite an honor to be asked by Coach Stanowski and his staff to be a part of that. I'll start with Peyton. Really, I was excited that he had the opportunity to be a part of the process. And for us, luckily, with him not being with us in the fall, he was in San Diego. He had one semester to finish his academics, so he went out and did basically an internship in San Diego and came back in January. So we were a little worried, what would it look like, right? But he had a couple events with U.S. Lacrosse, the last tryouts, over at Sparks, but then again down in Florida. So he came in great shape because he was preparing for that as well. So the stick was in his hand. And I've asked him, I said, listen, you've sat at those tables with those guys, and, I want you to talk to our team about the experience, because that's the best of the best. You just played with the best of the best that the PLL has, in college, and talk about that experience and what makes that experience unique, right? Like how we try to come together defensively and what was important to us as coaches. And I want you to really relay that to our program. And, I'm waiting for that moment. It's going to happen. We haven't asked him to do it yet, but he's prepared and excited about it. And I have seen him be a little more vocal with our own team. But he's got that quiet confidence that he's another level player right now for us. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been fun to kind of have him on the sideline. And I think even as I've tried to put in some drills, maybe that we did at the USA tryouts, he kind of understands what I'm expecting, and then kind of gets the guys into those positions, for those drills defensively. And for myself, just being around, Coach Danowski and Joe Amplo, who's a close friend, and, as well as Seth Tierney, kind of being able to bounce ideas off of them, and really adding to your contacts in your phone of people that, you can pick up at a moment's notice and call and just kind of say, hey, thinking this, what are you thinking? And yeah, Joe's in our league. But, we tend to, we live in the same area, and it's nice. It's nice to have a relationship outside of the lines, and be able to lean on those guys. And they're awesome guys. And I would say that about just being around the players for the U.S. team, even through the tryouts. They're just awesome guys, and you feel really good about our sport when you spend a weekend with those type of guys, that are the best of the best, and they tell their stories. And that's one thing that Coach Danowski does really well, is takes a group of guys and pulls them together in a very short period of time and creates that atmosphere where you want to be a part of it. And you don't want to let your next guy down. Right. And that's something that, has made me a little bit better, where I've been able to come back with our own team and challenge them.
It's pretty, it's pretty remarkable to hear you describe it that way, Coach. It's a really cool opportunity. And again, obviously this summer you look to go win a gold medal, but before that, some work to do this season. I guess let's for this team to bounce back and have the success and reach that standard that obviously exists at a place like Loyola. To you, the most important thing that needs to go right is what?
First of all, I will say that I've started with how I talk to our team. I used to put such an emphasis on, we open up with Virginia, or we open up with Maryland, and we've got Johns Hopkins and Rutgers
nice,
right
easy
away.
schedule to start the season, by the way. Nice cakewalk month.
You recruit saying, hey, these are the people that you're going to play. Like, you want to come to this type of place because you want to compete, right, at a really high level against those programs. And really this year, anybody in our locker room would tell you, I went to them and said, listen, yeah, they're on our schedule. We got to win the Patriot League. We have to keep our eye on what gets us to the tournament. We haven't won the Patriot League in a few years. Let's get back to taking care of our league, because that's the first step towards the tournament. And so trying to kind of change, not change the focus. Our guys know Maryland, right? Like, they know they're going to be excited to play all of those early season games. But I'm trying to keep their eye on our league and developing and putting ourselves in a position to play at a really high level against every opponent in our league. And that's been a different mindset. I would tell you from day one for me, and how I talk to my team. But, for us to win, I would tell you, we've got to play with the identity that I first talked about. We've got to play good, solid defense. We've got to be able to run a little bit. We've got to develop with some young players very quickly, on the offensive end, and develop some confidence. And I think from what I've seen, it's coming. We've got to we're not a really deep team, so the injury bug is important. Hopefully that'll stay out of our locker room. We're trying to manage our practices in a smart way to keep guys on the field. And, I think that there's enough talent in our locker room that can put us in a position to compete every Saturday.
He is Charley Toomey, head coach of the Loyola Greyhounds. Again, 2 big non-conference games in February for you to check them out at Ridley Athletic Complex. Next Saturday, the 11th, against Maryland. The following Saturday, the 18th, against Johns Hopkins. Coach, looking forward to seeing you next Saturday. Appreciate you as always, my friend. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Always great to chat with you guys. Thanks, Glenn. See you, Pat.
Take care.
That is Coach Charley Toomey from Loyola with us here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Hey, gambling can be fun, but you should set a limit and stay within it. And remember that if you or a loved one has a gambling problem, you can call 1-800-GAMBLER 24/7 or go to helpmygamblingproblem.org for free confidential services. Your thumbnail on the Greyhounds.
It sounds like it's kind of a back to basics year for Loyola, back to kind of what we think of them as. And you bring up Peyton Rozanka, sort of the latest in that long line of great D middies that they've had over the years.
Just relentless.
Hawkins, Begley, Higgins. I mean, we could go on a ways with some of these guys. And so, I think in so many ways that is the position that defines them. And when that is really sharp, when their rope unit's really good, they're really good. And yes, they were really good when Pat Spencer was there. That kind of defined them then. But as a program, I think that's kind of the defining position. And
it feels like when they've gotten their best goalie play.
And I was just going
Yeah.
to say, because of Charley Toomey's background as a goalie, played on a Final Four team back in 1990, all that, like that always has a little bit of an extra wrinkle to it where you're looking at it because he really isn't. It isn't simply just an analytics type of thing. It's not just simply raw numbers. Like this is he's somebody that really looks at very subtle things when it comes to goalies. And to hear him as optimistic as he is about Luke Stout, I think is a really good sign for them. At the other end of the field, it sure looks like they're going to be fairly midfield-oriented with guys that have played some on attack. I think we're going to see them invert a lot. I think we're going to see a lot of different pieces play significant minutes. He talked about how he might not have 3 60-minute attackmen, but it wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the season we're looking up and they've got 10 guys with a dozen, 15 goals or so, and maybe nobody has more than 30 or something like that.
Right.
I thought a player we didn't talk about with him, but came on strong at the end of last season was Davis Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a guy that they had thought was going to be able to have an impact. And when you look at his numbers from last year, I think it was like 9 and 20 or 8 goals and 20 assists. But almost all of that production was in the final month or so of the season. And so I think he's going to be a really key table setter for them this year as well.
You mentioned earlier, your thought about Lafayette and being a team ready to break through. The common belief is that BU is kind of the team to beat in the Patriot
They bring
League.
back a lot from that team that won the conference last year.
Do you feel like there's real separation for BU and then Loyola, Navy, Army, or is it more muddled than that?
I think it's fairly muddled. Like I thought BU was good last year, and one of the things about them is they just kind of do what they do, and they fly around, and they feel they're a team that has a bit of swagger to them. But you look at Loyola, which has a great foundation as a program. You look at Navy, which has gotten better. You look at Lehigh, which has Sisselberger, which automatically puts them in the mix against just about anybody.
Correct.
Because they can tilt the field. You've got Army, which isn't going to necessarily go anywhere. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in that league, and if you told me right now any one of those teams was going to wind up winning the conference, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And the opportunity for there to be an at-large in that group?
I think that depends, obviously, on what
they do
happens in non-conference play. And a team like Loyola,
the opportunities are definitely there.
That's the thing.
Right.
When you size up Loyola and they play Maryland and they play Hopkins and they play Rutgers and they play Duke and they play Georgetown and they play Towson, and I think I just went through their entire non-conference schedule right there. If you split that group, if you split those 6 games, then you've got yourself a fighting chance of being an at-large team, assuming you're doing a 7-1 or something along those lines in the Patriot League, and then you lose to somebody decent in the conference tournament. So, I know, Lehigh has some of those decent out-of-conference games. Army traditionally has a few of those as well. So I think that there are opportunities there, but if you were to put me on the spot and say who has the best at-large possibility simply by virtue of opportunity, it's Loyola. I mean, comparing that to, a team like Navy, no disrespect, but
right, Queens and Mount St. Mary, right,
and Manhattan and what have you, just isn't going to move the needle RPI wise, and whether that's a good way to do it or not. And that, by the way, is a conversation.
100%, right. Which is the better way to get yourself ready for Patriot League play, to build some confidence and stockpile wins.
And we can also have a conversation about whether the RPI is any good, but we would be here and not talk to anybody for the rest of the time. So.
I'm sure Notre Dame fans would have at least an opinion or two about that particular subject. Patrick Stevens is here. Hey, if you missed it last night, Stan the Fan Charles and Luke Jackson got together and sort of broke down what the Orioles have done this offseason, including adding a pitcher last week in Cole Irvin. You can find that show right now, facebook.com/PressBoxSports, youtube.com/PressBoxOnline, or PressBoxOnline.com/video. Really quickly, because Jeff wanted you to chime in about Maryland, Indiana tonight.
Maryland, Indiana tonight.
Basketball, yes,
Basketball,
obviously,
yes.
right.
We're gonna have to shift gears.
We have
here.
1 second here, so I figured, sure, why not?
Well, it's the same deal that we've talked about for much of the year, which is how do they handle a guy like Jackson Davis? Obviously stuck around against Purdue, which I thought was really impressive. Zach Edey got his, and they contained everybody else. And I think in a lot of ways, that's probably the best play, right?
Right.
Like okay, Jackson Davis is playing really great. Indiana's playing well. That wasn't a team that I was as high on as a lot of other people, and it felt like I was feeling pretty vindicated there for about 2 months. And now they've gotten themselves on a roll. They're healthy. That's a tough one. I think that's probably overall, behind UCLA and Purdue, their third toughest home game of the season on paper anyway. So, for them to be at 5-5 right now, they make the turn, and there's you start to sketch out that path to the postseason where it's like, okay, well, if you can win your kind of toss-up home games, right, against Northwestern, against Penn State, beat Minnesota at home, which you absolutely can't afford to lose, and then if you go and pick off Nebraska and Minnesota, suddenly you're 10-10, and if you win a game in the Big Ten tournament, are there going to be 36 other teams that have better at-large profiles? I don't know. But beating a team like Indiana would go a long way in terms of helping that and kind of alleviating some pressure later on in the season.
All right, let's do this. Let's grab a break here. We're scheduled to be joined by Tom Gravante from Mount St. Mary's here in just a second, but we'll grab a break first. Patrick Stevens is here. It's our annual College Lacrosse Preview Show.
Gambling can be a fun and entertaining experience, but there are risks involved. If you're planning on betting on the game at the casino or on your phone or computer, know your limit, stay within it. Set a budget and a time to stop. Remember, gambling isn't a financial solution, and it doesn't mix well with alcohol or drugs. Know the risks and have a plan before you begin gambling. For free and confidential services, call 1-800-GAMBLER 24/7 or go to helpmygamblingproblem.org.
The latest edition of Press Box is available now, and it's our annual Best Of issue. On the cover, we recognize Orioles catcher Adley Rutschman as our 2022 Mo Gabba Sports Person of the Year, and he sits down with us to discuss how his arrival in Baltimore was simultaneous with the Birds' turnaround. Also inside, we recognize the top people, performances, and moments of the year throughout the local sports scene. Press Box is available for free at over 500 area locations, including 60 Royal Farm stores, and you can always find the entire edition, as well as the best daily coverage of the Orioles, Ravens, and Terps at PressBoxOnline.com.
That first sip. That first bite. Start your day off right with a delicious breakfast at Royal Farms. Choose from a fantastic selection of fresh Royal Farms breakfast sandwiches and top it off with a rich hot cup of the freshest coffee in the world. At Royal Farms, breakfast is available day and night. It's the freshest breakfast in the world. Real fresh, real fast. Royal Farms.
Make the most out of every day in your Toyota RAV4. Available in hybrid or gas-only models. A RAV4 can get you where you want to go in style. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new RAV4s from your local Toyota dealer today.
The Baltimore County Police Department is hiring. Entry-level officers start at over $60,000 and over $64,000 for lateral officers, with $10,000 signing bonuses available. Plus, cadets start at over $32,000. Great benefits are available, like medical, dental, and vision insurance, tuition reimbursement, 15 sick days per calendar year with no limit, career advancement to more than 20 specialized units, and more, with further incentives for military service members and veterans. A passion for service, a career for life with the Baltimore County Police Department. Find out more at joinbaltimorecountypd.com or call 410-887-5542. Must be a United States citizen, have a valid driver's license, and a high school diploma or GED equivalent.
Check out Jeremy Kahn's daily picks at PressBoxOnline.com as he tries to find you daily winners. And speaking of winners, here's a man who once won a media curling contest, and I don't think anything else. He's Glenn Clark.
You can bet $5 on the NFL playoffs or any other game and get $150 in free bets from FanDuel right now. But you got to go to PressBoxOnline.com/offers in order to sign up and take advantage of that. Again, bet $5 on the big game or whatever it is we're allowed to call. I don't even know what the rules are anymore for this. The championship contest or any other game, and you get $150 in free bets guaranteed when you sign up with FanDuel through the link at PressBoxOnline.com/offers. It is our annual College Lacrosse Preview Show. Patrick Stevens is with us in studio. Next up on the hot seat, he is the head coach of the Mountaineers out at Mount St. Mary's. He is Coach Tom Gravante, and he's with us now here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's great to chat with you as always. Thank you so much for taking some time for us this morning.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Hey, Coach, obviously I think there's a lot of storylines for you guys, but I'll start with the league. Brand new league. Does it just mean brand new opponents and nothing else? Does it mean you have to change anything about the way you guys play to make it work? Like, what is the reality for you guys as you make the jump to a new league this season?
Well, the league's not new to me. It's going to be new to our players, but before we transitioned to the NEC, we played in the MAC, so I'm familiar with the schools. Actually, this time last year, when we made the commitment to go, AD sent an email. I was really excited because, a lot of those schools are built like us in terms of size, support, so on and so forth. So NEC was a good league. It was a tough league. We were right in the mix, but I think we're going to be better in this league. So very excited. Just really have to watch film, as much film as we can get our hands on, of the new teams in this league.
Tom, I know you guys have always played an ambitious non-conference schedule and continue to do so, but there are some scheduling demands that come from going from playing 7 league games to 9 league games. What was that juggling act like heading into this season?
Well, it wasn't that bad in terms of, dropping some teams, you might say. You really didn't want to drop Kevin Warren and Georgetown. There's historically that game was played before I got here in 1993, but, quite honestly, with COVID and his ability to grab high-level players, he can get a Duke transfer to do his master's at Georgetown. We can't compete with that. It's just, the reality is that's not going to happen for us. And Kevin's done a really nice job of bringing those young men in and really elevating his program. So he got it, in terms of he understood as much as I really liked playing that game. There's some other teams out there which are, a better fit for us, So, we had to just make some changes. Not many. I had Mercer on the schedule and there's a coaching change there and they just couldn't work it out. So, picked up NJIT, picked up Monmouth. Still have Towson, UMBC, Delaware, which I appreciate. And they work, and, it fits into our preseason schedule on both sides. So in terms of the conference, 9 games versus, 6 or 7 based on what we had at times in the NEC. So not too bad. What I really like about that is we have the same approach as the Patriot League, where we take 6 teams to the playoffs. top two get a bye. First four play in the quarterfinals, and then it moves on. And I really like that. I'm a coach that wants to get to playoffs. I'm not going to say, hey, let's win it. I mean, sure, we all want, as coaches, want to win it. But I also know I'm not fooled by wherever you are or seeding in the playoffs. And in my history, I've seen even myself as the first seed get knocked out and as the fourth seed win it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited that at least 6 out of the 10 teams in the MAC conference get to the conference playoffs and play on from there.
Mount St. Mary's coach Tom Gravante with us here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, Jared McMahon obviously has been someone who has been quite productive for you. He's now your only McMahon this season, but how helpful is it to have, to sort of start with someone that you can count on, that is as reliable as he's been for you these last few seasons?
That very, very exciting. I worried as he's a twin. His brother wanted to be up in the Boston market, so he went to Bryant. We helped him go there. Jared was on the fence. I mean, again, with twins, they grow up together all their life. And if you have a set that play sports together, there they are. So he was watching their roster and saw that their entire attack went elsewhere. And he knew that we were a little bit more mature, and it's and again, it's something that he really set as a goal. He wants to win it. He's a tremendous team leader. He is an offensive guy that has nonstop communication with the players. I mean, I'll use my own son, who's a freshman, and when I think kids talk to their parents, they come in that unique situation, right? But we will talk about practice at home and so on and so forth, and he says how valuable Jared is to him as a freshman. Putting him in the places he needs to be, just communicating him through things. So I'm extremely excited about Jared McMahon and his ability to really captain and lead our team this year, especially on offense.
Your team had 3 different starting goalies at times last year, but Griffin McGinley was clearly the top option when he was available, and had a couple 21 save games along the way, including against Navy. What's his development been like, and in particular, how does that position look for you guys heading into this season?
So, and that wasn't because we had issues. I mean, Griff was our starting goalie. We have a true senior on the team, and then I brought in a grad student.
Yep.
And once we kind of knew that it was out of reach, I just want to make sure that we can give our guys the best experience, the best student athlete experience I can give them. So we played some guys last year, and it worked out. Griff got it, and we made it clear to him, hey, you're a sophomore. We're going to be okay. You're our guy, and he's our guy this year as well. He's really done a nice job this fall, and he's predicted, as we hoped he would, into the spring, or at least the start of the spring. I've learned something a long time ago. The fall and spring are 2 different seasons, and when kids go home and come back, sometimes there's a change in them. So we have to wait to see how they start practicing, how they manage themselves in battle. He's our guy. I'm excited for him.
You mentioned Tom Gravante from Mount St. Mary's with us here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. You mentioned your son, TJ, and I just wanted to get a thought on sort of what that experience is like for you. I know he's kind of been away playing in high school. So having him back, having him with you? What's that relationship been like, father-son, coach and pupil? Like, how has that been for you, having him on the team?
Well, honestly, I didn't think I was going to be in this position. I tried as his dad to help him through the process, get him to some of the schools that he had on his radar, as most parents would like to do that for their kids. I've been here, this is my 31st season since '93. And I've seen a lot of administrators, kids be born, grow up, and like a lot of them, because they grow up in the Mount St. Mary's family, they want out. They want to get out and maybe go to a bigger school. All along I was quietly letting him know that sometimes bigger isn't better. But it is a very unique and exciting, but it also can be very trying, and not so much, trying to coach up your son. Our relationship on the field, he gets it. It's not like he's never played for me before. I think I coached him all the way up until 8th grade in the youth, right, the club teams. But, once he was going to high school, that's where I separated myself. But he's done a really nice job. He also understands that, he's probably going to be held and should hold himself to somewhat of a higher standard, really, as a coach's kid, and he has. Like, he knows that there's going to be watchful eyes on him. I try to separate myself this fall and let my staff kind of handle it. We had 10 attackmen at the start of the fall season. I really wanted to trim that down to 8 so we could have 4 guys on each side, in terms of a blue team and a white team, or the first team and the second team. And, I let them kind of come up with the top 4 and then the second top 4. And, he really got himself into the top 4. So he's worked himself into a playing position. I think if he maintains his health up until this Saturday, I'm confident he will. But in this game, especially with these frigid temperatures, you just never know as coaches. He will start for us, and he's really done a nice job of handling that, managing himself maturely. So I'm really proud of him.
It's cool to, as a dad, it's really cool to hear you talk about it that way, Coach. That's really neat. Coach, just big picture for this team, right? Like, for you guys to break through and be able to be competitive back in the MAC in this first season, the most important thing that has to happen for this team is what?
Well, I think that it's really going to start with, my assistant doesn't really like me to say this word, but it's culture, right? Leadership. It's how we help our upperclassmen manage the team. I mean, I have a large class of young men who are outstanding kids in the classroom, and we started from day one with them, 15 of them, with a team of 55. So we kind of set up 7 groups, with leaders of each of those groups, with 6 to 8 kids in each group, and really helping them understand what it is to be a good teammate. Guys want to play, right? And if you're coming out of a really high quality high school and you've played, since your sophomore, junior year, and then all of a sudden you go from who's who to who's he to nobody knows who you are, and you're on the bottom again. Kids struggle with that mentally. But we have to make sure that our upperclassmen recognize that there's going to be some hurt emotionally with these young men, and get them through that, because your first guy, which may be your best guy to ring, your best guy can't be treated any different than your 55th guy. Everybody's important, and we have to make sure that these young men drive that point home, that what you do matters. You're on the scout team. We need you to be the best you can be to give our starting D a look, and vice versa. So that's the situation moving in, right? That we're trying to take into a very successful season, and certainly into the MAC, to get to those playoffs. I'm pretty certain that any team that has ever got to that national championship, if you ask that coach, hey, how do you feel about your squad? What do you think of those kids? I'm pretty certain he said, well, I don't really like these guys. I think they, we're not very good people. I mean, they'll tell you, you can take that up with John Tillman. I'm certain he'll tell you that he had a great group of young men last year, So that's going to be our approach. And again, we're excited about this new conference and getting to those playoffs.
Tom Gravante, head coach at Mount St. Mary's. They open the season this Saturday at Navy at 12 o'clock, and then they'll be back home the following Saturday for the home opener against Towson at 3. Coach, appreciate you taking the time for us as always. Best of luck this season. Look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Appreciate it.
Tom Gravante from Mount St. Mary's. Patrick Stevens, your thumbnail on the Mountaineers.
Lots of new there, right?
Yep.
Getting adjusted to a different league, a big league. They'll be playing a couple midweek games in conference play. And I do like the fact, like he alluded to as well, a 6-team conference tournament. They do that. The Patriot League does it. The Big Ten does it now too.
Right.
They kind of kept that expanded version. So that's a good thing. And I feel like for Mount St. Mary's, coming off 5-9, something to that effect last year. I think basically if you can, if you get the good goalie play you think you're going to get, and you have some pieces on offense, can you make that conference tournament in year one and kind of go from there?
That's got to be the goal, obviously. Just take a step, move forward, and see what happens after that. Seems like an appropriate time for me to remind you guys that today's show is brought to you by UMBC Athletics, as the Retrievers, basketball-wise, are home on Wednesday night, taking on Binghamton. Hit a little bit of a sort of a slump here of late, but obviously they've been very good all season long, and the schedule was tough the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, back-to-back road games. I think the loss at Vermont is perfectly understandable.
Yes.
I think they'd probably like to get that game at NJIT back.
They will try to get back in the win column, as we mentioned, Wednesday night when they host Binghamton. You can get your tickets and experience game day at the Peak right now by going to umbcretrievers.com. And while you're thinking about it, maybe you scoop up some tickets to see UMBC lacrosse this season as we continue here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. They're the latest, I think, of all the local teams for their actual start to the season, as their opener will be February 18th at Drexel. Joining us now, he is the head coach of the Retrievers. He's our friend Ryan Moran, and he's with us on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's always great to catch up with you, sir. Thank you for taking the time for us, as always.
Well, thanks for having me here, guys.
It's great to chat with you, Coach. I remember talking to you last year on this show and talked about, how good your defense could be. Well, as it turns out, your defense was really stinking good, right? One of the top 10 scoring defenses in the country. So I'll pose it to you. Can your defense be even better potentially this season?
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely some changes within leadership. Coach Bucci got a who was our defensive coordinator last year, got a new position at Penn State this year, and so Craig Chick has taken over as the defensive coordinator. And we've lost a goalie, our starting goalie, Tommy Lingner, who has been a 5-year starter, and Colin Kasner has left and graduated as well. So there's some new pieces down there. I hope that we can be as successful as last year, but it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of improvement to be able to match that.
You bring up the goalie situation and Tommy Lingner's graduation. I know Jason Ting started a couple games last season for you. How does that group look at this point, and do you feel like you're close to kind of settling on a starter for the opener? Is that something that might linger into the season?
I'm really happy with the goalie play so far in the preseason. Jason has performed really well. Connor McMahon, who is a freshman from Archbishop Spalding, has performed really well. Keith LaPierre, who is a freshman from Francis Scott Key High School, has performed really well. They are pushing each other, and Jason definitely has some more experience in college, and I think being able to compete in our conference championship game, the semifinals and the championship last year, really helped him in terms of just gaining some confidence and playing in a big environment. So really excited with how he's been playing. But all the goalies have been performing really well and pushing each other in practice, which is nice to see.
We look at players that really were stepped up a year ago. Jordan Galloway clearly is right at the top of that list, Conference Rookie of the Year. I guess twofold, Coach. One, did you see that coming? Like, did you know that he was going to be able to be that impactful that quickly? And if that's where you're starting, like, sky is the limit seems like the phrase that comes to mind. But what really is he capable of doing moving forward now in his career?
Jordan had a great freshman year, and if you asked me, he thought he was going to be Conference Rookie of the Year in the fall, I might have said probably not, if I'm being honest with you guys. I think it's just a testament to athletics and working really hard, being consistent and reliable in practice, earning your opportunity to get on the field at a young age like Jordan did, and then seizing that opportunity and gaining a lot of confidence. And he allowed that confidence to roll the whole spring. And, starting in Drexel where he came out, I think he had 2 goals or maybe a hat trick. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled into every game. We expected him to have at least two or 3 points, whether it be a goal and 2 assists or vice versa. And he had that consistency and that reliability. And I'm glad that the other coaches in the conference kind of acknowledged and noticed that as well, because he did have a really tremendous year and grew a lot and improved a lot, and a player that we're certainly proud of in our program.
Ryan, I know it's always tempting on the outside to kind of think of things in linear fashion, like you do X in one year and you pick up right where you left off, and that's obviously not how it works. But that said, you guys do have some continuity. Your top 7 scorers are back. You have 8 guys back who started that conference tournament title game up at Vermont. How much do you think that continuity will help, and do you feel like you're starting off from a better spot than maybe you have at times in the last few years?
There's some good to it and there's some bad to it. The good is you have guys that are somewhat of a known entity and have proven that they can do it. The bad is that they think it's just going to happen. And as a coach, you got to be consistently harping on it just doesn't happen. You got to work hard for it every single day to improve. And really, that's been one of the challenges we had in the fall, of just not assuming just because we have done things in the past that's just going to happen. And if you handle your business differently, well, you're probably going to get a different result. So we need to handle our business the way we've been handling it, in terms of just a steady approach to being consistent, being reliable. Hopefully that breeds a lot of improvement, and that improvement hopefully reflects with some success on the team. So it's always a challenge, because sometimes when they, have some success, they think it's just going to happen, and that's just not how it works.
Coach, with that in mind, how do you close the gap, right? Like, Vermont's been the team to beat now for a little bit in this league. What, as you point out, you have made progress. You've shown there is definitely stability right now with UMBC lacrosse, but there's the monster, right? That's waiting for you. How do you make up that difference in order to be the team that breaks through?
I don't know if they're the monster. I think they've gotten some wins versus them in the last 2 or 3 years as well. But they have certainly won the conference the last 2 years in a row. So I tip my hat to Vermont. I don't know if there's exactly one specific thing we need to improve on in order to beat the teams that are in our conference. It's always going to be everything. You can improve at everything. So unfortunately, I can't pinpoint down and say, hey, if we do this, we're going to get that, because last year I gave the answer, well, certainly going to need to face off better versus Vermont. And guess what? We did face off a lot better versus them. I think we actually faced off over 50% both times, and we lost both times too. So it's really just going to be everything. And also just staying hungry and staying motivated, which I think our team is, in terms of right now where we are in the conference and what we want to be able to accomplish.
One thing that does stand out as a difference is you guys are back in the stadium this year with the construction project being done over there. And I've been over to the basketball season, and I'm like, gosh, that looks really nice over there. I got to think that for you guys, it's even better to finally have yourself kind of situated again after having the year away up on the soccer pitch.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for UMBC, the athletic department, the university to put that much money and resources into renovating the stadium. It does look really nice. Stands completely redone, brand new press box, brand new fan amenities building, brand new walkway through a new bridge put in. So it's really great atmosphere to be able to practice in every day. And then also we're super excited to give a first-class experience in a first-class environment for the fans that come to support us.
As you can imagine, I'm really excited about the press box.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
And it was made to the exact specificities that Gary Stein asked for, correct? Like, you gave him
always.
Hey, Patrick just brought up you guys playing on the soccer pitch. Some kind of, I had no idea, stunning news that comes from UMBC this morning. Pete Caringi has announced his retirement as a soccer coach at UMBC. Coach, can you, Pete is such an overwhelming figure and one of my favorite people that I've covered in this sport. Can you tell me about what he has meant to the department, the UMBC community, and as you've laid your own foundation, just having somebody like that around that's such an important person on that campus?
Yeah, Coach Caringi is truly a unique person. Has always been super nice to everyone here. Always has a smile. Always, with his experience and his charisma and sense of humor, always knows what to say in the exact moment. And I'm sure that's what makes him such a successful communicator and educator and coach. I know for myself personally, he's welcomed me with open arms. Has always come in, mainstay and kind of pop into my office and asking me how things are going, which really means a lot. And I know he's moving on from coaching, but I hope he's able to stay involved with the UMBC athletic department in some capacity.
Yeah, I'd almost be stunned if that wasn't the case. I mean, the man is UMBC. There is no doubt about it. Ryan Moran, the season, as I mentioned, gets underway a little bit later than everybody else. Can you tell me about that, too? Like, are you just sort of making a personal crusade? Like, we shouldn't be playing when it's 15 degrees outside. What are we doing?
I don't know why all these teams want to start up this weekend. We started practicing January 9th, and I still feel there's a large portion of things that we need to secure, tie up, and teach and coach in order to be successful, or in order to put our team to be in a position to be as successful as I'd like to see them be in a game. So, but every coach is different. I think we've exhausted all of our contests, our 17 contests within the fall and the spring, and I'm still able to open up. I'm still opening up season play the third week end of February. So I don't know where all these other people are getting their contest games from, I guess.
I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of people that would say we prefer it play a little bit later. Let's keep it that way. Opening February 18th at Drexel, and then the first home game February 24th, a Friday night against Mount St. Mary's. Coach Ryan Moran, always appreciate you, man. We'll be checking in with you during the course of the season. Thank you so much for taking the time for us this morning.
No, thank you guys as well. Have a great day.
He is Coach Ryan Moran from UMBC with us here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Yeah, I just got that message as we started our conversation with Coach Moran, Pete Caringi, an absolute icon in local soccer. Of course, UMBC made that stunning run to the Final Four. God, what year was that? It was 14? Yeah, in 2014. That incredibly dramatic run, but mainstays for a while in the NCAA tournament, and Pete Caringi has announced his retirement from collegiate coaching. 310 career victories, one of the 59.5 winning percentage during the course of his career.
320 victories in 33 seasons, 34 seasons, something like that, 31.
Yeah,
roughly 10.
That's
10 a year. That's not an easy thing to do.
32 seasons. 32 seasons.
So roughly 10 a year, basically.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad. Yes, thank you for correcting me as I was reading the numbers before the 2022 season. It's 320 victories over 32 years. Not bad at all. Hell of a career for Pete Caringi. I have no doubt he'll join us at some point this week.
As you were saying that, it's like, well, I know what one of your segments tomorrow is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've my personal affinity for Pete Caringi. It on top of being a hell of a coach, he's just a hell of a dude. Like, and he would listen to shows and call in to talk about whatever it is that you were talking about. He'd be like, dude, I want to call in and talk about the Ravens tomorrow. So you got to coach. We'll make some time for you.
You got the hotline.
Hey man, I was so. If they could have somehow won the title that year, it would have been the most amazing thing, maybe in the history of Baltimore sports. But
it would have been like Coastal Carolina winning the
really,
College World Series.
Really a great comparison. Really, like what? like, what? But what a run that was, and what a run he had at UMBC. All right, quickly, your thumbnail on the Retrievers.
Obviously, it was funny when you're talking about what's it going to take to knock down Vermont and slay the dragon. Well, it certainly helps that Vermont finally graduated some guys. Like Thomas McConvey will be suiting up for Vermont or for Virginia this year.
And they have a pretty prominent coaching change.
And they they do have that as well. So I think for UMBC. The continuity, as Ryan Moran suggested, is some good, some get bad. I think ultimately that's mostly good. The goalie play, I think they can solve that situation pretty handily. I expect to see them in the conference tournament again. I do think Vermont in there, and I think Bryant as well coming in, even with a new coach. Mike Pressler retired, and Brad Ross took over after having spent the last few years as the offensive coordinator at Navy. I do think UMBC is definitely going to be in that mix in that league. And don't forget about the Dane train. Never good to forget about Albany, just with kind of the loosey-goosey style that they have. But I think they're going to be in the mix too. And a team to look out for in that league over the long haul is UMass Lowell. Hired Drew Kelleher away from Manhattan, a team that went to the NCAA tournament last year. And I think he has the goods to be able to turn that thing around.
Right now, bet $10, get another 200 in free bets from BetMGM if you sign up through the link at PressBoxOnline.com/offers. When we come back in, it's the head coach of the defending national champions, Coach John Tillman from Maryland, joins us next. It's our College Lacrosse Preview Show.
Gambling can be a fun and entertaining experience, but there are risks involved. If you're planning on betting on the game at the casino or on your phone or computer, know your limit, stay within it. Set a budget and a time to stop. Remember, gambling isn't a financial solution, and it doesn't mix well with alcohol or drugs. Know the risks and have a plan before you begin gambling. For free and confidential services, call 1-800-GAMBLER 24/7 or go to helpmygamblingproblem.org.
Whether your focus is luxury and comfort, convenience and technologically advanced connectivity, or sporty performance and aggressive styling, we've got the perfect Highlander for you. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new Highlanders from your local Toyota dealer today.
Looking for some excitement in the new year? Laurel Park has plenty of live horse racing events to spice things up this January. The much-anticipated Winter Meet kicks off on January 1st, plus we've got special MLK Holiday Racing on Monday, January 16th, and the Winter Carnival Stakes on Saturday, January 21st. Winter may be cold, but the racing at Laurel Park is hot. Learn more about upcoming January events by visiting laurelpark.com.
Stan the Fan here, welcoming back one of my favorite sponsors, the Costas Inn. And everybody around Baltimore knows the Costas Inn is a great place to go and grab crabs, steaks, salads, soups, whatever's on your mind to eat in person. But did you know that the Costas Inn has upped their game? They are now one of the premier takeout places in Baltimore. Give them a call now to order your food, 410-477-1975. That's the Costas Inn over 4100 North Point Boulevard.
Another Orioles season is in the books, and the Bat-Around was there every step of the way as the Birds posted their first winning season in 6 years. And after promoting 2 #1 overall prospects in Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, Mike Elias has said it's liftoff from here. Hi, I'm Paul Valley, and along with my co-host Zach Goodman, we'll be here every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon all off season, discussing every signing, trade, and waiver claim as we navigate the cold winter months that lead to spring training. You can watch us at youtube.com/PressBoxOnline and Facebook.com/PressBoxSports, or listen live at PressBoxOnline.com/radio. And if you miss a show, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. So tune into the Bat-Around with Paul Valley and Zach Goodman every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon right here at PressBox Sports.
It's the perfect time to sign the young basketball fan in your life up for a membership in the Retriever Kids Club. It includes free youth admission to all regular season UMBC home games, plus a t-shirt and a drawstring backpack. Membership is only $35. It makes a great gift. Visit UMBCRetrievers.com/Kids Club for more info. Membership is available for kids 12 and under in the Retriever Kids Club. Again, UMBCRetrievers.com/Kids Club.
If you can't listen or watch live, you can subscribe to the show via Spotify, Amazon, or Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star review while you're there. Or, if lying isn't your thing, we'll take a 3.5-star review too.
Back in here on our College Lacrosse Preview Show, Patrick Stevens is with us from the Washington Post and USA Lacrosse Magazine. You, of course, follow him on Twitter at Discourse, D1S Course. We do have one more minute here. We brought up Maryland earlier. Anything else local basketball-wise that we would have covered today that is worth discuss? I mean, God, UMES. I guess we have to keep talking about that, don't we?
Yeah, they are tied for the league at the turn. The league lead at the turn at 6-1. They just beat Morgan State last night, and so Eastern Shore and Howard tied at 6-1 in the MEAC. Towson picked up another couple wins last week. They're a game back at Charleston, which got knocked off at home by Hofstra. So single game week for Towson, a big one. If they go up to Hofstra and win, it becomes really, really hard to see how that team with that remaining schedule finishes much worse than about third in the league.
That being said, it's not easy to go win at Hofstra.
It's not easy to go do that. But if you get the sweep, then you're suddenly, basically 2 games clear of Hofstra because you have the tiebreaker over them plus a game. So they're doing what they're doing, and not surprising. You look at the remaining schedule. They do have that Charleston-Wilmington weekend at the end that's going to be tricky. But they appear well on their way. Cam Holden with a triple-double the other day against William and Mary. Only the second Tiger ever to do it. Gerald Beneman was the other one.
It's pretty good company.
Pretty good company for number 55 over there. So Loyola got a win.
Yeah, we were both there on Saturday. Yeah,
so that was
Deion Perry's a fun little player to watch sometimes.
Deion Perry and I'll tell you what, Jalen Andrews had a great game against Bucknell, and that's a guy that really, really needed it. He had struggled mightily over the last 4 or 5 games.
My father leaned in at one point when we were watching I took my kids and my dad to the game on Saturday, and my father leaned in at one point and said, "There's something about Muggsy Bogues there. He was just the harassing, undersized defensive player that just kind of tries to make your life miserable and give you hell." I'm not trying to compare. Muggsy Bogues is one of the greatest players in Baltimore basketball history, despite the fact that he was 5'3". But there is just something entertaining about an undersized player that makes it up with their effort.
Certainly so. And so, I think that was a victory that Loyola very much needed, given how this season has gone.
It's been a tough year, no doubt about it. All right, joining us now, this man, all they did last year was put together one of the greatest seasons in the history of the sport. Second national championship for him as the head coach at the University of Maryland, and they'll look to do it again this season. He is Coach John Tillman, and he is back with us here on the College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's always great to catch up with you. Thank you for taking the time for us this morning.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's great to chat. It's interesting, right? I remember when you first got here, we would talk about like the burden of inheriting a streak that wasn't yours, right? But like you had to carry it anyway as far as the national championship drought is concerned. Is there a burden at all to now resetting the standard that like if Maryland lacrosse loses a game, everybody in the world thinks that the sky is falling?
Well, that's on them because we play a lot of really good teams, and certainly you're always disappointed when you don't win a game. But, we play so many good teams that's inevitable. It's just very rare that, you're going to go through a season undefeated. And that's a credit to all those, really good teams, good players, and the coaches out there. There aren't many Saturdays where, we're staring down a game that it's going to be easy. I just don't think there are many teams out there that you could just line up at the Division I level and have an easy day. Everybody does such a good job with their prep work, and there's so many good players. So any week, it could go well. Any week it might not go well, but you still have to kind of put your best foot forward going forward and hopefully learn from that experience.
John, I know we've talked many, many times over the years about, the human nature element of things and complacency and what have you. And obviously a team like last year's was hungry going in, having gotten so close to a national title and fallen short. This time around, you got that title, and you've obviously been through this before. But what is kind of the give and take there with the complacency element, and how do you fight against it?
Yeah, that is it is. One of the things that when you step back, Patrick, it's an interesting dynamic because it's easy to say, well, this is this year and that was last year. But when you talk to people or you read anything or hear anything, a lot of times it is brought up, and we have great kids in our locker room, but they are 18 to 22-year-olds. And I just know, using the other kind of the disappointment part in 21, it was very motivating. So, having that as something that really motivated the guys, it was a natural. So now you look and you don't have that, the concern is always, are you as hungry as you were before? Are you, putting in that much effort? Do you have that level of focus? Are you pushing yourself that much harder as you did in the past? And certainly, the be the best mentality, to me, it shouldn't matter how the last year goes. Like we reset it and we start from scratch. But, you'd be crazy as a coach not to kind of be concerned with that, given what happened last year. So I think our kids are trying to do a good job with that. We do have really good leaders. I think all of us kind of talked about how this is a new opportunity. And I think our kids are smart enough to realize, like, a lot of those guys aren't here anymore. So this is a new year with new challenges, and we have a lot of guys in new spots. And, what happened last year isn't going to carry over. And I think our kids have done a pretty good job with that.
On the front of guys in new spots, I mean, it's been a long time, I think, since we didn't realize going in, easily peg who those, that charismatic offensive lead guys were, whether it was Rambo and Heacock, and then Jared Bernhardt was an obvious successor along with Connor Kelly, and then obviously Logan Wisnauskas emerges and wins a Tewaaraton last year to kind of cap a stellar career of his. Obviously, I could sit here and name a guy like a Kyle Long who's been a mainstay, or a guy like an Owen Murphy who was a breakout player for you last year. But is there kind of that obvious, in your mind, charismatic offensive leader that you could count on to put up 3-2, 4-2, stuff like that on a week-in, week-out basis?
No, and I think, you nailed really the two guys that are probably coming back, have the marquee names, based on last year or the years prior. So I think to a certain extent there's always a positive to having a Jared Bernhardt or a Logan, just because there's comfort there, there's experience, have been there, done that. But then on the other side, knowing that, I think if everybody, on the field realizes that we've got to do this together and we can't just sit around and watch one guy do it, maybe that can work to your advantage in that everybody's going to be super dialed in. Everybody's going to be excited about their opportunity. Maybe, defensively, as people prepare for this, it's a little less if we take away this guy, will really impact them. It's a little bit more of, okay, well, one guy's just not going to stir the drink. It's going to be everybody collaboratively. And hopefully, in a perfect world, it'd be somebody different each week. It's just a healthy way to do it. Plus, again, for teams preparing for us, it's like, okay, you help too much on this guy. Well, this guy may have an opportunity. But there are times when, you have that group and they're kind of the no-name group and they realize how important it is to work together. Your chemistry might be better. Your off-ball movement might be better. And again, you might be a little less predictable.
He is John Tillman, Maryland lacrosse coach. He's with us here in our College Lacrosse Preview Show. Coach, I remember chatting with you on the field before, we called your fall ball event up at USA Lacrosse, and we were talking about the number 1 jersey. And I remember Monica and I both walking away from the conversation and saying, it's going to be a defensive player. Like, we just know it's going to be a defensive player. You went with Brett Makar. Can you take me through, just the decision to go that route? And, was it everybody's talking about it from the outside. It's the first time that you've done it with a defensive player, but was it that difficult of a decision for you?
I think if you looked back in history, my gut is, there have been a number of defensive guys, goalies, defensive guys that have worn it. But I think in recent memory, it's been shaded towards the offensive guys. So I totally get, why people have kind of said, well, it's got to be an offensive guy. And we really, felt like it was something that was important enough for us to, let's take the fall to figure it out and really have communication with each other and kind of see how the whole thing plays out. Because in our opinion, there was a number of factors, right? It's a marquee name or a marquee number, and it means a lot. Historically, that person, I think, has really embodied everything that, when you think of that team, it's kind of the guy you think about. It's the, more than just lacrosse. So we kind of sat and we had conversations. We had conversations with former number ones. Obviously, it's an easy conversation in the Bernhardt family, knowing that two of them are here as the coaching staff and Jared has worn it. Even talking to Logan, when he came back for the alumni weekend, just, hey, what are your thoughts? What do you think? And we had a number of guys. I mean, you certainly could have not gone wrong with a guy like Kyle Long or Owen Murphy or even Logan McNaney or Luke. Like any of those guys, I think would have been great. I think the other thing that is important too is, with that number, and it could go into any number in any sport, there's a little bit added weight to it. And I'm not going to use the word pressure, but, there's a little bit more of a, hey, you're a guy that, is looked at a little bit more carefully, maybe judged a little bit harsher because of the standard and the tradition of that number. And I do think Brett is very well suited. He's been very successful for 4 years. He's been a 4-year starter. He's is as good as anybody out there at his position. So to me, it's something that I don't think it'll change his mindset any single day going out there. And I do think there's something to be said for that. The last thing you want to do is put maybe pressure on a young guy that really, hasn't been there, done that. And is that a healthy thing for them? So to have somebody that's established, I think is established as a leader, a great player, a great person. And for Brett, much like Logan and Jared and some of the other guys, it was not anything they were seeking. It was not something like, hey, I want to get this. When I talked to him and maybe had that early conversation, it was like, and I said, yeah, just think about it. But I think knowing that, hey, we believe you have all the attributes to really, represent the program and that number the right way. It just made a lot of sense for Brett, much like it, any of the other guys would have been great choices too.
On the subject of Brett Makar, you look at how that defense brings back a fair bit, certainly in the close defense with him and Ajax Apatello, John Geppert at pole, and you mentioned Logan McNaney in the cage. How much do you anticipate that kind of being sort of the bedrock of what you guys are going to do in this season at the defensive end?
Yeah, and I think for those guys, all individually good players, but I do think those guys are very good leaders and very good influencers, and their ability to make sure that everybody's on the same page will be really important. Whatever defense we're in, whatever the calls are, whatever we're trying to do, to make sure that they're on point, they're communicating effectively and clearly, and making sure that, especially some of those other guys that maybe will be new in there, they can help those guys. And sometimes when you're a new player, especially on the defensive end, it's more important to be a really good listener than it is a really good talker, because a lot of times those older guys can really tell you what to do. They'll tell you when to slide. They'll tell you what you're in. So sometimes if you can just take your cues from them and make sure you're on point with what they're saying, it helps. But those guys, that's going to be critical for us, because I do think we have some new parts that can do a good job. We've seen some really good improvement so far in our scrimmages. We've had, obviously you talked about Team USA in the fall and Cornell, our alums, and now with Duke and Georgetown, you're talking about some good teams. And we really felt like that was going to be important for the growth of this team, but also the improvement to get them ready for game day.
Just another couple minutes here. John Tillman, University of Maryland lacrosse coach. Coach, you bring up Logan McNaney, of course, Luke Weirman, what a revelation he proved to be. From the outside, it would be easy for me to say, sure, Maryland's got to replace a lot offensively and the short stick D-middies, but when you've got a Logan McNaney and a Luke Weirman, like your floor can only be so low, right? Like when you're that strong at such important positions on the field. Internally, do you have a similar feeling? Like if we have this amount of confidence in our goalie and our faceoff specialist, a lot of these other things, we can figure that out and work that thing out throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I think you always sleep better at night knowing that you have guys that have done it and can do it again. It doesn't mean that it's, they're going to walk on the field and it's just a given thing. But I think it's a much different contrast to, hey, we have a new starter and he's never been in that spot, so we hope he can do it. We know there's no carryover, but both those guys are very dedicated. They're very focused. They're very detailed. So, they have to prove it again, but you feel better knowing that they've been through those wars. They know how to navigate a season. And even in some of the biggest moments, they have played pretty well. I don't see those guys as guys that are going to be complacent guys. They're usually, pretty self-motivated in practice. Obviously, we're trying to make sure it's a competitive environment. But especially in our sport, we're knowing that possessions are really important. Knowing that, hopefully if those guys do well or they have a pretty good day, that might start you off with a few extra possessions. And when you have some newer guys, if you can get a few extra possessions, that covers up for maybe, a bad decision or, a turnover, or just a lack of execution, which, usually happens early season.
You brought him up, so let's talk about it. You're all Bernhardt now. Your coordinator positions is Bobby Benson moves on, and it doesn't hurt to be able to turn to a Jake Bernhardt at that point and say, hey, come on back. We got a spot for you. I guess twofold. What does that look like? What does he bring something different philosophy-wise with him as he comes back? Or, also, I guess the other part of that is, too, like, do you have Jared informally working for you at this point? Like, is it just all Bernhardt all the time?
We don't have Jared doing too much. We're super excited for him. Obviously proud of what
No
he's
doubt.
been doing. He's been pretty locked up there. But I think he might be coming back for the opener just to come back and support his brothers, which is great. And, we're proud of him for all he's done on and off the field. But I think anytime you add somebody new, much like Bobby Benson last year, most of those guys are going to be smart enough to kind of say, all right, this is what you've been doing, with the parts that you have. And I think every year you kind of have to look and go, do we need to adjust certain things? And, it could be subtle little things, but, even though like some guys have graduated, you have like emphasized certain, philosophies and beliefs and sets and principles. So I think a lot of times you'll still do a lot of those same things, but I always give the same example. If you had a running quarterback, you wouldn't want to drop back and throw the ball 50 times and vice versa. So, you always want to tailor what you're doing to your kids' strengths. What you're hoping is if they've been in the program for 1, 2, 3 years, they've kind of in practice shown you some things. And based on what we've done, you've kind of seen out of what we've done historically, okay, we can continue some of these things, but maybe we need to adjust a little bit here and there, whether it's just one group or, overall, and maybe that's just what they do better. So we will be open-minded with it. I think anytime a guy goes away to another program, much like when Jesse left, he spent some time at Rutgers and Princeton. He does bring some new ideas because he's worked with other people. And I think that's a healthy thing. A new set of eyes. Hey, what do you guys do here? Or why don't you do it this way? Listen, we want to hear those things. I think that's how your organization gets better. I thought Bobby did a great job with that. Without blowing up what we did, some new wrinkles and ideas. And certainly a bright guy, and Jake's a bright guy. When you watched that Vermont film last year, you saw a lot of what we did in Vermont. There were just a lot of similar attributes, so that made me feel very comfortable when we were talking about filling the position. Okay, like this is not going to be a guy coming in where, he's going to have to learn a new system and we're going to have to overhaul everything. A lot of what they were doing seemed very similar to some of the principles we had. But again, if he felt like, hey, I think we might be better doing this, I think we're always open to hearing it. And I think the kids are very open to that too. Whatever's going to make them successful, we're happy to look at and do.
Season gets underway this Saturday when they host Richmond in College Park at 1 o'clock on what's going to be a frigid day, 28 degrees or so. But you can check them out. And then, of course, they'll be back up here in Baltimore the following Saturday to take on Loyola at 1 o'clock at Ridley Athletic Complex. Coach John Tillman, I always appreciate taking the time for us. We'll be in touch during the course of the season. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
John Tillman, Maryland lacrosse coach, with us on our College Lacrosse Preview Show. We could probably spend 10 minutes doing a thumbnail on Maryland, but just give me your They lose a lot, but they're going to be really good.
Not as good as last year, but still pretty good.
Yeah, right. When I've had conversation privately, I have felt that. Like, you have an exceptional face-off specialist, you have an exceptional goalie. I truly believe that Maryland's going to be capable of figuring out the other things they have to figure out this season.
In all likelihood, I mean, I don't think they are going to be head and shoulders above the rest of the country, like they were last season. But I would also say that more likely than not, we'll be seeing them in Philadelphia.
It's typically, I feel like a few years ago, you had like a list of 4 teams that you could almost count on.
Well, there was one time where it was Virginia, Princeton, Hopkins, and Syracuse, and then it kind of, and then probably about around 2012, 2013, 2014 in there.
Duke and Maryland,
and Notre Dame and Denver.
Yeah.
And now it's maybe a little more fluid than that.
Yep, a bit more fluid. There's no doubt about it. We are winding down for our College Lacrosse Preview Show. It has also been brought to you by your local Toyota dealer and buyatoyota.com. Of course, the Toyota Tacoma comes in a range of models and trim lines, so you can choose the perfect Tacoma to reflect your unique personality and driving habits. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new Tacomas from your local Toyota dealer today. Peter Milliman is going to join us here in a second from Johns Hopkins. Obviously, with Maryland being the team to beat, can you give me your breakdown of the rest of the Big Ten this season?
Well, I certainly think that Rutgers and Ohio State, 2 tournament teams from last year, are going to be in the mix again. Rutgers has maybe not as reliant on those transfers, but they still had a fair number of one-year additions that they had. You know, they get I'm blanking on the midfielder's name. Sprock,
Thank you.
Sprock's back. David Sprock's back. In addition to having Knobloch, in addition to having Ross Scott, they'll be different in the cage this year for sure. But there's a lot to like about them. Ohio State has a new stadium that they're opening this season. They add Marcus Hudgens from Army, and I think defensively they should be.
They're opening Lacrosse-specific stadium?
Yes.
Wow, that's a big deal.
It is, and they have one now, and obviously Penn State has Panzer Stadium as well. So, and Michigan has one too.
Are they going to still try to play a game like the spring?
I don't know if they're going to do that long term or not.
Okay.
But anyway, I do think that Hopkins is going to be better. I think that Michigan showed some signs of promise last year, and frankly, I think Penn State can't help but to be at least a little bit better than last year. So I think that the league in aggregate is going to be better than it was last year, and I think Hopkins is a team that's going to be really fascinating to see develop this season.
Well, let's wrap things up this morning. The final coach we put on the hot seat here in our College Lacrosse Preview Show indeed is the head coach of the Blue Jays. He is Coach Peter Milliman, and he's with us now here on GCR. Coach, it's Glenn and Patrick. It's great to catch up with you as always. Thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes for us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
I got to talk about the genius of scheduling. If you're going to have to play on February 4th, I guess it's a lot better to play in Jacksonville than it is to play in Baltimore, where it's supposed to be 28 degrees.
Yeah, sometimes those things work out. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll try and keep it as an away game every year.
Right. Make it a tradition. Maybe if you can't keep it up, you invite somebody else to go down to Jacksonville to play against you in the future.
Yeah. I used to always get jealous of that preseason basketball tournament in Hawaii, like the Maui Invitational.
Right.
Got to have something like that for.
Wait, you're not planning on wearing like a floral shirt on Saturday, are you, Coach?
I don't know. It depends on how warm it is. We'll see.
Hey, we'll consider it. Hey, Coach, look, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to make an excuse, but I think to come in at the time that you did, obviously given that COVID, we didn't have all the answers when you arrived, and we didn't get all the answers anytime quickly after that. Do you feel like you're finally at a place where that's no longer a factor, where whatever's happened the first couple of years and the difficulties that you dealt with, you can just get into a place where you have set a foundation and you can take the steps forward now as a program without having to deal with all of those burdens?
I mean, you know what? Just realistically, I think it's important that the guys embrace where we are right now and what we're doing in this season. And every season and every team is completely different. It's a new makeup of guys. It's a new dynamic as a group. And you got different priorities. And so, we're not talking about where we've been or what we've done in the last few years. We're not talking about anything in the past, just about what we can do this year, what's right in front of us, and how hard we're committing to being the best team that we can be. So, there's some challenges with everything that you're doing. And I understand that there may have been some at certain times, but I think the energy is great. Guys are excited, and we're just, really looking forward to getting out there on a game day.
Firmly in the moment here, John Crawley back at Hopkins as the offensive coordinator, a young guy, a guy that obviously has some coaching experience here from the last several seasons. What sort of impact has he had, and does that relative youth kind of help in terms of creating some cohesion among some of your offensive players?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an impact in a lot of ways. I mean, first and foremost, he's an outstanding offensive coordinator. He's got a great experience and a background, at a few different programs, running some good offense at Lehigh for the last few years. He was a significant player here, as a two-time captain and a big piece of the offense, and an All-American midfielder, and really has a good understanding of what offense should look like. I think when it comes to his experience, his youth, he's just playing in the pros this summer. There's an obvious connection there as well. But I think most importantly, he's just a passionate Blue Jay. He just wants to be successful here. He wants to, these guys to have the best experience they can. He cares deeply about not just them as athletes and competitors, but them as young men. And that comes across in the way he coaches. And I think guys really gravitate to that.
It feels like it doesn't hurt when you have an offense and you're able to get a 40-goal scorer to come back for a fifth year as well, correct?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'm always gonna lean towards that. If we can add 40 more goals to the lineup. I think there's a handful of guys that are in the mix and doing some great things. I think Garrett is specifically somebody we're gonna have to lean on in certain situations. He had a great scrimmage this past weekend against Denver, but really he's just leading as a captain and being a great teammate right now is most important.
At the other end of the field, Alex Mazzone, pick up from Georgetown at long pole. What sort of influence is he going to have on what you guys are going to be able to do on defense?
Al brings a lot of experience. He was a 4-year starter at Georgetown. It's a very successful program. Got a great foundation of defensive knowledge from a great system there, and really just bringing that competitive nature to our program. He's the youngest of 4 brothers that all played Division I lacrosse, and some of them played pro. And he's got it in his blood. He's a great kid, a great teammate. He knows the game, cares about it the right way, and guys have really taken to him pretty quickly.
Have you settled on a goalie going into the season, Coach?
I think we're pretty confident in where we are with the lineup, but I think that it's a great competition. I think the guys are all bringing the best out of each other. I think it's the best group I've seen in a while, and I'm just excited for them to continue to push and develop. But I think we're starting to make progress towards that.
If we told you that nobody in Jacksonville was allowed to listen, would that help? Like, no, I understand. I completely.
If you promise not to say anything, I'll tell you. No, I don't know if I can commit to any of that yet.
I know we talked at this time last year about just kind of the schedule design, a couple Fridays, Sundays, and what have you. I think the thing that's striking this year is maintaining some longtime rivalries with Carolina and Virginia with those midweek games. When so much of the sport has kind of shied away from those Tuesday or Wednesday games, you guys have plunged in with these. Just how important was it to have those games and to have those rivalries, and how willing are you to keep playing midweek games when they seem to be a vanishing breed?
Yeah. I don't know. There's always a trend towards something. And I think there's a lot of teams that are, maybe playing less games or just Tuesday games. I mean, I think, first and foremost at Johns Hopkins, you're supposed to be playing the best competition. This is an opportunity to be in a position to compete with the best teams and earn an opportunity to the NCAA tournament. So we need to strengthen the schedule as much as possible when it comes to that. There's also a lot of longstanding rivalries. There's we got to get Princeton back on the schedule. There's a lot of these things that just kind of come with the territory here. So with the ever evolving ACC landscape and the way that they change their schedule year to year, it just sometimes it just happens. It's the nature of planning where the weekend that you had it booked for is not going to be the one that works. And luckily both those coaches were open to a midweek game. I know it might not be the most optimal time frame for fans and things like that, but this is when you can get those games, and you got to do what you can to put your schedule together. So I'm always open to playing the teams that we need to play, and wherever and whenever we need to. I think our guys are excited about the opportunity.
Coach, I wonder, you reference, obviously, the tradition of Johns Hopkins lacrosse and who you're supposed to be playing against and what you're supposed to be doing. Do you guys talk about, like, hey, there is an expectation here, and this is what we're supposed to be as a program? Or do you have to say, we got to worry about Jacksonville? Like, we can't worry about all that other stuff, even if you know that that's the ultimate goal for a program?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I'd even say it's a third different focus, and that's on us. I think just like you can overfocus on Jacksonville, just like you can overfocus on the strength of your schedule, you can overfocus on expectations and tradition here, and really all we're responsible for doing is being the best version of the 2023 Blue Jays that we can, and guys are really embracing that. I think to reference the past is kind of a necessity here, just because of its proximity. I mean, you're around it all the time. The tradition, there's success all over this program, but we want to make sure that they understand the appropriate place that it needs to be in our overall program and in our focus week to week, and that's recognize where you are and that this is a program that excellence is a standard, and beyond that, it's just doing the best we can to be our best version, and keeping that focus internal and the expectations of the guys internal.
I understand the answer might be a little bit of everything, but is there one thing to you that stands out that says, if we do this season, then we'll be ready to make that jump. We'll be ready to get back to the NCAA tournament if we can do this as a team?
Pick up more ground balls.
Okay. I mean,
if we pick up more ground balls, we will be a better team.
I mean, it seems as simple as that. Sometimes it really does. Coach, before we let you go, if I could, I know you had, you referenced the scrimmage and having Denver in. Obviously, it's a special year with it being Coach Tierney's final season. Did you find yourself, spending a minute with him? Could you tell me? I know you were at Princeton after he had left, but have you had a relationship with Coach Tierney over the years, and did it mean something to you to be able to bring him in, knowing this is sort of his last hurrah?
Yeah, I mean, every opportunity to be on a field with Coach Tierney is, it's a privilege. It's, he's a special person in our sport. He's done tremendous things, not just competitively, but for the betterment of our sport and of our profession. And I got an immense amount of respect for him. I think he's such a great guy and such a great mentor. I did develop a relationship with him because I was at Princeton. I didn't know him before that, but he's such a good guy, and he and I were able to make a connection there. And just having the opportunity in the last, couple of years to compete against him, and obviously, in the business, you see him around at different places and things like that. So it was a little bit of a special moment for me just to have an opportunity to be back on the field again with him. But then the whistle blows and we're competing, and he's giving me the death stare and all that he normally does. So it gives it a little bit of a reality check right back to it. So it was cool. It will be. I think it will be a great year for him just to experience this one last time. But at the end of the day, it's about more than that. He's done an incredible amount for our sport, not just his team. So.
First couple opportunities for you to see the Blue Jays at home this season. Next Saturday, the 11th, 1 o'clock against Georgetown, and then that following Tuesday, the 14th, at 5 o'clock against North Carolina. The season gets underway this Saturday at Jacksonville, where he may or may not be donning some Hawaiian shirts for the game against the Dolphins. Coach Peter Milliman, appreciate you taking the time for us this morning. We will be in touch throughout the course of the season. Look forward to chatting with you again down the road. All right.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Peter Milliman, head coach at Johns Hopkins, wrapping up. Hey, gambling can be fun, but you should set a limit and stay within it. Remember that if you or a loved one has a gambling problem, you can call 1-800-GAMBLER 24/7 or visit helpmygamblingproblem.org for free confidential services. Your thumbnail on Johns Hopkins.
Well, I think it'll be curious to see the influence of John Crawley on that offense. I think that even though Peter Milliman doesn't want to make any excuses about the last couple of years, obviously the first year in particular was greatly impacted by the pandemic. And there were times last year where they looked decent, and there were times last year where they just they were not as competitive as they would have liked to have been. And I really feel like, game to game to game, one of the more striking things that happened for them was just getting trucked by Maryland at home. I mean, that was that was probably the best game Maryland played last season, and to have that happen to you, and you're down 18 or whatever it is, and you take your worst loss ever at home, for them to come out the next week and play really well,
competitive,
they beat Penn State in the quarters and beat them like a drum. And then to come out, and they didn't beat Maryland. Nobody did last year, but they were a lot more competitive in the Big Ten semifinals. And some of that is, if you're Maryland, you're like, we just
killed these guys,
we just destroyed these guys, right? But Hopkins played a lot better, and so I thought that showed a lot to me about the trajectory that they could have been on. It could have been okay, we're going to pack it in, and now you're kind of sitting there wondering like, and so they showed some fight down the stretch. I think they'll be better with a more cohesive offense. I don't think that things were quite right there in terms of communication, all that stuff, behind the scenes. I think they're going to be better this year. And does better constitute being in the NCAA tournament mix and maybe pushing Maryland and for a conference title or finishing second in the Big Ten, or does better mean, well, you're more like 15th, 16th, and you're in the conversation into April, but you don't quite have enough in the tank? I don't know that, and that's going to be one of the fun things to learn. We're certainly going to learn it fast with that schedule. We mentioned Virginia, we mentioned Carolina, they play Syracuse, Jacksonville's good, Loyola's good. We can run right down the list, and it's not like there's very many places to hide in the Big Ten either. So that Navy-Delaware weekend is going to be a bear again, and it got them last year. And they got Georgetown early this season. So I think with Hopkins, there's going to be opportunities there, and I think they might be a team more than some others that could really use a good February, just to get off to a decent start, to be above water, and to be in a spot where they feel good about where things are headed, and that there's proof of concept already, as opposed to this is the process, this sort of thing, that sort of talk. And process talk has a way of being, well, we'll get there eventually,
sure,
right? Like that's sort of the underlying element.
Let's say the quiet part out loud. Is there some pressure there? This is the third season, right? This is Johns Hopkins lacrosse that we're talking about. Is there an amount of
I think there's certainly pressure not to regress.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be progress there. I think that, again, I kind of throw out that first season. I mean, and I'm not sitting here saying that there weren't things to learn and there weren't criticisms to make. But I just feel like that was such a weird spot to be in for a first-year coach. Last year they were better, but they weren't great. They were still 7-9. I think you need to be on the right side of 500 if you're Hopkins, and showing progress. Because at the end of the day, I had somebody ask me in the not too distant past, kind of looking at where Hopkins has been really on the second half of its Big Ten tenure to this point. And it's like, do you ever think that they're gonna de-emphasize this, or it's not going to be as big of a deal? It's like there's a big honking lacrosse building there in the end zone that tells you that it's a big deal there, and it's going to continue to be a big deal. Now, it's not like it was in 1980 when there were only 6 teams competing. Not there were more than 6 teams, but you know what I'm saying.
Really, yes.
It kind of ties into sort of the argument of the whole best ever thing with Maryland last year. It's like, well, no, because there were teams in the past that had a larger share of
the
talent,
right.
And so it's a time. This is a time where there's fewer great teams but more good teams, and that's something that the Syracuses and the Hopkinses and the Navies kind of have to reckon with. That it's not the same as it once was, but that doesn't mean you can't be good. That doesn't mean you can't be relevant. And I'm curious to see how this thing unfolds this year. The goalie situation is a great question at Hopkins. What sort of offensive identity they have. I think that we will see progress from Hopkins this year, and I think that I'm not going to sit here and say that Hopkins winning 10 titles in a row is good for lacrosse, but that's one of those teams where it almost feels like it's a little better for the sport when they're in the mix, when they're relevant. They don't necessarily have to be great, But I think that, tying the past and the present and the future all together, it's good to have teams like that you hear from. This is sort of the same argument, unfortunately, that you would hear in football. Well, it's good when Notre Dame is good. Well, not necessarily good, but relevant in the conversation. It's something people are talking about, just because it is something that people are accustomed
familiar
to talk
with.
about.
Yes, correct, exactly right. Like, oh right, yes, Johns Hopkins lacrosse. I understand exactly what you're saying. All right, went 7 for 7. Everybody posted. That's good news.
There are Major League Baseball teams that would be thrilled to have 7 consecutive starting pitchers make their scheduled starts.
They might be thrilled to have 4 in some instances. Hey, a couple of things quickly. One, don't forget, UMBC basketball is home this Wednesday against Binghamton. You can get your tickets right now at umbcretrievers.com to experience game day at the Peak, UMBC Binghamton this Wednesday night. With that in mind, what's on your schedule this week, Patrick Stevens?
Well, I will be in College Park tonight for that Indiana-Maryland game. Apparently, Trace Jackson Davis is the most dominant player in the Big Ten. I think Kevin Willard probably chose his words poorly there.
Yeah.
The correct thing, by the way, if you had said that Trace Jackson Davis was the most skilled player in the Big Ten,
I was thinking explosive to me was the word that came to mind.
But
right?
I think skilled is reasonable for this because
Zach Edey's big.
Zach Edey is a mountain of a man, basically, and it's not exactly a great guard league. Right? Besides Pickett at Penn State, I mean, it's not – when you think of this iteration of the Big Ten, you're thinking about Murray at Iowa and Dickinson at Michigan and Jackson Davis and Edey. Like, you're thinking big guys. And so I think to say that Jackson Davis is the most skilled player in the league is probably fair. But in terms of dominance, it's hard to argue with the 7'3" dude in West Lafayette. So anyway – gonna go catch Creighton. They're in town to play Georgetown, which finally ended that Big East losing
streak. They beat
DePaul,
right?
They beat DePaul. The 3,700 in attendance were thrilled.
I can't believe it's that many, if I'm being honest with you.
It probably wasn't. It probably was. Well, I was asking myself that question.
Yeah, I bet you were.
But Creighton is a team that was hyped early, had some injuries, lost 6 in a row. They looked great in Maui until they didn't. And now they're playing well again. And then Saturday, I'm still kind of in flux on what Saturday is going to look like.
It's that weird time of year where there's a couple different sports going on.
It's a weird time, a couple different sports going on. But we'll certainly be busy somewhere as Saturday unfolds. So it's actually kind of a quiet week after the next couple days. There's nothing around here Thursday. There's nothing around here Friday. There's nothing around here. I will be at Navy for lacrosse on Sunday.
Okay,
for that Queens game and an early look at the midshipmen. So we'll be there, but then nothing Monday. So it's
there's no MEAC game on Monday.
No, they actually scheduled.
Oh, that's right.
They scheduled a weekend off, and in fact, it's helped on the women's side because they had some COVID makeups. Morgan State has a neutral site game against Delaware State
Newark,
up
right?
in Newark.
Yeah.
And Delaware State actually plays again on Tuesday against Chicago State in Dover.
Whose event is that? Because that's a TNT game.
It's I believe it's the Michael B. Jordan.
Michael B. Jordan. That's exactly who it is. That's exactly who did that event. Yes. So that's it's part of Black History Month. Trying to get some exposure for HBCUs.
And Norfolk State and Hampton, which also played in the Chris Paul event out in Vegas, are playing in this one as well.
Cool.
So Hampton gets the weekend bye, one of the weekend byes, since I guess Towson has a weekend bye too. So there must be 3 teams off in the CAA.
Because Towson plays Hampton after that, right?
Yes,
they play
middle of the week. Yep.
All right, at Discourse, D1S Course, of course, the Washington Post and USA Lacrosse Magazine is where you can see his stuff. Quickly, here's what's coming up tonight. Of course, we mentioned Indiana, Maryland, 9 o'clock on ESPN2. I believe Robbie Hummel's doing that game again after he did the one over the weekend. All the rest of the college basketball, find at GlennClarkRadio.com. Capitals, Blue Jackets tonight at 7 on NBC Sports Washington. TNT for Lakers, Knicks at 7:30. I know Rami will be glued to that. Pelicans, Nuggets at 10. NHL Network, Kings, Hurricanes at 7. Non-sports-wise, that Pamela Anderson documentary premieres on Netflix that has been getting a lot of conversation if you want to check that out. Again, everything else you can find at GlennClarkRadio.com. Thanks to Patrick. Thanks to all of the coaches who joined us this morning. Shawn Nadelen from Towson, Joe Amplo from Navy. Oh, man, I've already blanked. Oh, Charley Toomey from Loyola, Tom Gravante from Mount St. Mary's, Ryan Moran from UMBC, John Tillman from Maryland, Peter Milliman from Johns Hopkins. We'll get all of it up in the greatest hits section. On the program tomorrow, we're going to do a much more a traditional Glenn Clark radio show. I believe Brandon Williams, former Raven, who is now with the Chiefs and is going to be playing in the Super Bowl, is going to be joining us on tomorrow's show. And Drew's going to check in. We'll have stuff and things on the program tomorrow. Thanks. Don't forget, if you haven't picked up the print issue of Press Box, it is available for free at your neighborhood Royal Farms, any of the hundreds of locations around town where you find Press Box. Read it all, PressBoxOnline.com. You see Adley Rutschman on the cover, our Mo Gabba Sports Person of the Year. Go get that right now. All right. Thanks, everybody at PressBox, all of our great sponsors and partners, including the Baltimore County Police Department, Problem Gambling, Royal Farms, Costas Inn, Maryland Jockey Club, Grade 8's Memorabilia, Maryland Vascular Specialists, UMBC Athletics, your local Toyota dealer, buyatoyota.com. Thanks to Charles. It's AP, 28. What is it? Charles AP28 on Instagram. Rami, you're on Twitter at Rami_Lavi, correct?
Rami_Lavi on Twitter.
Lavi. I say Lavi.
Yeah, and then Rami.Lavi on Instagram also.
Very good. Give him a follow. And Rami will be doing more of the show with us. Believe it or not, Rami not all the way up on college lacrosse. Not his area of expertise.
Not exactly.
Said, hey, Rami, can you come in and fill in this week? We're throwing a bunch of college lacrosse on Tuesday.
I said, of course.
I got you. Appreciate it, buddy. Thank you for being in here to do that. Of course, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Glenn Clark Radio. Have a great Tuesday night. We'll see you tomorrow.